chosen links by Boaz.
Hello, welcome. This is Chosen Links, and I'm your host, Boaz Hepner, and I am ecstatic and honored and mildly intimidated today by the people that I have on. We're going to have an unbelievably important discussion, and it's about the impactful, that's an understatement, in a super impactful globally initiative that's called the Abraham Accords. What I have today gathered with me is a group of people who have various different reasons why they have things to contribute to it, whether they were involved in the earlier accords, in the potential future accords, analysts on it, or people who have very interesting commentaries about it because of their dealings with the Middle East and with the Western world. I'm very excited to introduce all of you. Thank you for telling me a bit about yourselves. And this is going to be alphabetized, so please do not take this in order of importance because it is not. First of all, we have Abdullah Antepli. Professor Antepli is a globally acknowledged scholar and leader of cross-religious and cross-cultural dialogue in American higher education and in the nonprofit world. He has built multiple organizations and initiatives to facilitate religious and spiritual life across America's college campuses, sowing seeds of understanding between religions while upholding their cultural integrity and dignity. In July 2019, Antepli joined the Sanford School of Public Policy as Associate Professor of the Practice, with a secondary appointment at the Divinity School as Associate Professor of the Practice of Interfaith Relations. He's a senior fellow on Jewish-Muslim relations at Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, where he founded and co-directs the widely recognized Muslim Leader Initiative. As a Muslim American imam, one of the very few scholars bridging faith, ethics, and public policy, and as someone who was born in Turkey and lived in 3 different countries, he offers the Academy an important element of intellectual, ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity. Very cool, and I thank Professor Dan Wiener for introducing us. Dan wanted to be on today but couldn't. Nir Boms. Dr. Nir Boms is a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University, where he manages the program on regional cooperation. His book, Expatting Democracy, deals with the influence of expat communities on democracy discourse in the Middle East. And his recent book, The Syrian War Between Justice and Political Reality, deals with the Syrian War. He is also the editor of Regional Cooperation in the Midst of Regional Conflagration, examining the partnership agenda in the shadow of October 7th, a publication on the status of regional partnership following the Gaza war. He taught and lectured in Australia, Bulgaria, England, Hong Kong, Hungary, Poland, Turkey, South Africa, Brazil, Morocco, and the US, the UN, and its Human Rights Council on issues relating to the Middle East, terrorism, and democratization. He is fluent in Hebrew, English, and Arabic, and holy cow, that's a lot of countries to be in. Thank you, and thank you to Yaara, who I'm going to get to later, but who brought many of you into me. I mean, about 60% of you I know via Yaara, which I really appreciate.
Thank you for getting us together.
Oh, absolutely. Next, we have Soraya Deen, who I had the pleasure to have on my most recent episode about PTSD in Israel. Soraya M. Deen is an award-winning Muslim feminist lawyer, interfaith advocate, international activist, community organizer, and public speaker. She is a passionate practitioner of nonviolent communication and promotes communication that enhances collaboration and compassion. She is currently building Nigerian Women Lead, a grassroots movement of women taking action on promoting life and liberty. A strong practitioner of Eastern spiritual practices, Soraya believes that mastering and monitoring our habitual thoughts are critical for well-being and health. She authored the book Serve, A Call to Muslims and Peace Matters, Raising Peace-Conscious Children. Thank you for joining us from your daughter's graduation. I know you're going to have to prioritize that at some point. Next, we have Dan Feferman. Dan is a speaker, thought leader, activist, and researcher on Israel, the Jewish world, and the Middle East. He has published widely, appeared in media, speaks globally, known for presenting complex issues with clarity and depth. Until 2024, he served as executive director of Sharaka, a leading nonprofit advancing the public diplomacy between Israel and the Arab world, and promoting the Abraham Accords. He now serves as its chairman while also launching a new Middle East media initiative and working on his 3rd book. Thanks for being here, Dan. Dan was available for the whole time, but he actually ended up being on a last-minute work trip to, I believe, Poland, so we will enjoy him while we can. Zach Grashin, this is the person I've known the longest on the chat. Zach Grashin has been working in film and TV for almost 20 years and has focused his attention on building bridges between Jews and Arabs through entertainment. He's currently working on producing major international productions with talent from both cultures as a way to unite the people of the region and around the world through the power of storytelling. As Yaara told me, it would be great to have Zach on because then we can talk about the whole concept of soft diplomacy, which is its own very important technique, separate from the Accords. It's nice to have Zach here. I've known Zach forever, since he was just about a baby, because I spent 2 summers in 1989 and 1991 in Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska, at his grandparents' beautiful lake house. And he was running around as a little kid, and I've literally known him since then. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we have Ahmed Khuzaie. Ahmed is a Bahraini political consultant, visiting professor, columnist, author, and public speaker, specializing in international politics and campaigning. He leads Khuzaie Associates LLC, a Washington, D.C. based consultancy firm. He has gained recognition beyond Bahrain, serving as an ambassador and international coordinator for BPUR International, an organization advocating against the political abuse of religion, and Sharaka, an Abraham Accords people-to-people NGO. His work often emphasizes factual, balanced analyses over ideological or emotional perspectives, as seen in his writings on Bahrain political unrest, which he argues predates the 2011 Arab Spring and has deeper historical roots. With a strong presence in both academic and practical political spheres, Ahmed is a notable figure in Middle Eastern and global political consulting. Next, we have Chama Mechtaly. Chama is the founder of the Emma Lazarus Institute for Liberty and Tolerance, an action tank bridging media and policy gaps between the Middle East and the democratic West. She is a policy advisor, public speaker, artist, entrepreneur, and activist working in service of conflict transformation, de-radicalization, and regional integration in MENA and beyond. She is a recipient of the Middle East Policy Council's 40 Under 40 Award, an Atlantic Council Win and MLP Fellow, a Schusterman Foundation ROIer, an Israel Policy Forum convener, and a council member at the New Voice of the People initiative by President Isaac Herzog. Chama is based between New York and Dubai. Wow. The credentials of the people on this today are unparalleled. Next, we have Alex Plitsas. Alex Plitsas is a senior non-resident fellow and director of the Counterterrorism Project at the Atlantic Council, where he previously as deputy for Arab-Israeli normalization efforts. He is a frequent national security commentator on CNN and Fox News. Alex is also the vice president for transformation at Infor, an enterprise software company, and a board member at Special Operations Association of America, SOAA. Prior to moving to the private sector, Alex served as Chief of Sensitive Activities in the Office of the Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism at the Pentagon, as a Defense Civilian Intelligence Officer for the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence with service in Afghanistan, and as a project manager at Northrop Grumman Corporation. He also spent 8 years in U.S. Army Reserve Special Operations and as combat veteran of the Iraq War. Thank you for your service, truly. Next, we have Ahmed Quraishi. Ahmed is a journalist and strategist with deep roots in the Middle East, where he spent over 20 years reporting from conflict zones and advising on regional policy. Frequently found in Islamabad and Dubai, he has worked out of nearly every major city across the region. Fluent in multiple regional languages and dialects, Ahmed brings a rare, on-the-ground perspective to global conversations. He's hosted TV shows, worked in government positions, and you can occasionally find him on the region's Arab, Pakistani, and Israeli TV screens, where he continues to bridge divides and unpack the region's fast-changing landscape. Thanks for being here with us today, Ahmed. Next, we have Yaara, my friend Yaara. Yaara Segal is a strategy and communications consultant specializing in the MENA region and the Abraham Accords. She served in Israel's foreign ministry and was a senior advisor to Israel's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates, playing a pivotal role in advancing diplomatic and strategic relations in the Gulf. As a founding member of the first Israeli embassy in the UAE following the historic signing of the Abraham Accords, Yaara acted as a special advisor to the ambassador. In this capacity, she led high-impact initiatives and helped establish bilateral partnerships across a wide range of sectors. Previously, she served as Chief of Staff to the Director General of Regional Cooperation in Israel, where she spearheaded regional projects and cultivated collaborations with Arab nations, including those newly aligned through the Abraham Accords. Earlier in her career, Ms. Segal was a director of public diplomacy and the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles. There, she developed strategic alliances with key U.S. institutions and organizations to strengthen Israel-U.S. relations and elevate Israel's profile on the international stage. Let me just say, this wouldn't be happening today without Yaara, and I don't just mean because she introduced me to some of you, because I would have eventually tried to reach out to people. The reason this wouldn't have happened today is because she literally came over to visit me in Los Angeles. I believe it was Sukkot of 2024. We sat in my dining room with my wife and my dog, and we sat there with laptops and discussed, could we put together one on the Abraham Accords, and brainstormed who she knew and who I knew, and we literally brought it together. I even offered if she wanted to sit next to me as the co-host, but she said no, she wants to be a guest like the rest of you.
I mean,
Okay.
how can I turn down all these brilliant people? I want to be a part of that conversation. Thank you, Boaz, so much. I'm so excited about today.
My absolute pleasure. And we have a few last people to get to alphabetically. We have former Ambassador Mark Sievers. Mark Sievers arrived in Abu Dhabi in August 2021 to take up the position of inaugural director of AJC Abu Dhabi, the Sidner Lerner Center for Arab-Jewish Understanding. A career American diplomat for over 30 years, Ambassador Sievers retired from the State Department at the end of 2019, most recently having served as ambassador to the Sultanate of Oman from January 2016 through November 2019. Ambassador Sievers' diplomatic career took him to posts across the Middle East and North Africa. As director of AJC Abu Dhabi, he is building on over 25 years of AJC engagement with the United Arab Emirates and other Arabian Gulf states. The Abu Dhabi office deepens ties with the leadership and people of the Arabian Gulf, promoting the expansion of the historic Abraham Accords, and serves as a bridge between the American Jewish community and the region, a global center of finance, technology, and energy industries. Very cool to have you on. Next, we have Ksenia Svetlova. Hi, Ksenia. And we're doing this at a very hard time for her in terms of bedtime with kids, so she will run and go as she needs to, which we would all understand. Ksenia Svetlova is a former member of Knesset who currently serves as the executive director at ROPES, Regional Organization for Peace, Economics, and Security. She is also an associate fellow at Chatham House and the author of On High Heels in the Middle East. Svetlova lives in Modi'in, Israel, with her husband Anatoly and their 3 children. I have not one but 2 friends who are making Aliyah to Modi'in within the next few months.
We are waiting for them with open arms.
I'm glad you are. Next, we have Amjad Taha. Amjad is a political strategist, author, and analyst from the UAE and a luminary in the realm of global geopolitics. His expertise, honed through rigorous research and advisory roles, has shaped and fostered understanding across diverse cultural and political landscapes. As a respected journalist, his articles in both Western and Arab media outlets offer balanced perspectives on regional dynamics. With over 1 million followers on social media, Taha advocates for peace and normalization, serving as a bridge between cultures and promoting dialogue in the digital age. An absolute honor and coolness for all of us to have Amjad on. And last but not least, my buddy Ethan Winterstein, who I had on my second episode with college students. Ethan Winterstein is a senior at Cal State Fullerton studying accounting. He serves as president of CSUF Hillel and previously led the AEPI chapter at UC Irvine. He also represents Hillel International's Israel Leadership Network and is a senior Geller Fellow with the Israel on Campus Coalition, ICC, reflecting his commitment to Jewish and Zionist advocacy. And the reason Ethan is on, if it's not obvious, is because that Geller Fellowship is very, very cool, and it offers a very neat perspective as to what the young people today, what the next generation are being introduced to in terms of the diplomacy with the Middle East. So it's very cool to have Ethan and his South African accent on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the younger representation.
For sure. So Thank you very much for bearing with the honorifics, but it's really important people do know who all of you are, and you certainly more than deserve that. It really is wonderful to have all of you here. So without further ado, I'm going to get started because we actually have people who have to go at various times for very exciting reasons. We have Soraya Deen, who's at her daughter's graduation as we speak. We have Amjad Taha, who is about to go on CNN and hopefully meet with Trump himself. It's an unbelievable gathering, and without further ado, I really thank you all for being here. And I'm going to kick it over to Amjad, who needs to go soonest. And I'm going to start with a question for you, Amjad, if you don't mind, and then you can pivot to anything else. The Abraham Accords, as we already have had them since the first term of Donald Trump, with 4 different countries. Can you tell us your thoughts on how our relations look these several years later with the accords that have already happened?
Our relationship right now, thank you for having me. Our relationship right now looks perfect, and it was tested. I mean, the 7th of October genocide, when Hamas terrorist organization carried the genocide against the Jewish, against the humanity, to be honest, against the diversity that exists in Israel, be it the Muslim, Christianity, Jews, and all. And when that happened, it was a test to the Abrahamic Accord. Would it continue? Would it stop? It continued. The only, in fact, flight that hasn't stopped up to this stage, up to the point I'm speaking right now, back and forth from Israel to Dubai, is Fly Dubai. In fact, when I was speaking to in a anti-Semitism conference in Florida, in Palm Beach, we were conversing about the fact one of the congressmen came to me and he said, Amjad, when I wanted to go to Israel after the 7th of October, we didn't find the American airline, and they tried the Netherlands airline. It didn't work, and then they had to just come to Dubai, and then from Dubai head to the to Ben Gurion. So our relationship continues, and it has thrived throughout time. It started from 0 up to now. We're speaking about $7 billion of trades. We're speaking about more than 3,000 to 7,000 who are Israeli and Jewish community that exist in my country, and we're speaking about more than 300 Israeli companies that are exporting and importing and working from here, right here. And to even more celebrate it today, as we welcome President Donald Trump, I think we have a great example to set. While many can talk and many can act as peaceful as they are, even though at one point or another stage they worked as a PR for Hamas organization, we walk the talk, and we don't just do the empty speech. Where tomorrow the president will be meeting and members of the Jewish community, and also visiting the synagogue in the Abrahamic family house. That itself, that's a message to the entire world. If you were looking in that darkness after the 7th of October for a light, guess what? You found the light. That light tomorrow, it will be shining from the Abrahamic family house, right there where the Jewish community existed. And it's the fact that we had to face some of the challenges where Iranian proxy came all the way through some Uzbekis murderers who came all the way to kill an rabbi. Guess what happened? A few hours, those criminals, those terrorists, murderers, they thought that they're going to get away with it. They went to Turkey. Our beautiful, amazing intelligence services went all the way to Turkey, got them back into the UAE, put them in front of the judges, sentenced them to death. And guess what? The good news is that the rabbi's wife is back into the UAE. She's living in Abu Dhabi. She's running the market in Dubai, and she gave birth to her daughter right in Dubai. Wow. This is the safety. This is coexistence. This is peace and prosperity and what we stand for. It's not, are we doing this for business? Or are we doing this? No, we're doing it because we understand and we exist and we stand together, and together we stand and together we thrive. And when the 7th of October happened, just like, I'm not comparing, but I'm just setting an example. Just like when the Holocaust happened, up to this stage, we do have academics, people with knowledge meant to be still are Holocaust deniers. And when the Holocaust happened, some people were silent, some people celebrated it, some people participated in it, and some people fought against it and saved the Jewish community back then. Guess what? We would love to stand with the family of the hostage, and I would be shamed if I ever, at any point, at any breath, stand with a kidnapper of the baby. The Middle East is changing, and the Middle East has two different perspectives. One, for example, us in UAE, at one point we wanted to reach the Mars. We thought of it. We sent our students to the best universities in the United States of America. They came back scientists. We reached Mars. On the other side, while we were doing this, someone was digging a tunnel to kidnap a baby as 8 months old, baby Cafe, and Biba's family. Together we stand and together thrive. And I have to leave at this stage. I'm sincerely sorry, Boaz. You mean a lot, your colleagues and your friends. And I promise you, we're going to have another one where I can actually stay longer.
We're not gonna blame you for the fact that the president is literally there. Amjad, can I just tell you on behalf of everybody who was traumatized by October 7th, which is, you know, most of the sane world at least, can I just tell you that we really appreciate you stepping up the way you have consistently since then. Before I even started doing my show, I connected with you just to thank you offline, and I started to share your words with the Jewish Journal. I just want to tell you, you know, that's not something that I can say about, you know, everybody or even most people. On behalf of people who are not even just Jewish, but just are pro-democracy and pro-free world and pro-peace and pro-Israel, I want to thank you for being you. I wish I had time to ask you your background, why you are what you are, how you've become in your role you are, but I know you don't have time to say that. In about 10 seconds, can you just tell me, do you have optimism in terms of more countries joining in during this?
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. 1,000,000%. As soon as this war is finished, there is a lot of Muslim. In fact, it's going to be more Muslim rather than the Arab countries. And then coming back to the Arab countries, things are moving faster than being outside the box, seeing what's inside there. I'm very optimistic. And you have a nation that's been thriving as well. As a nation, the Jewish nations have went through a lot of atrocities before, and they have thrived and they have survived. So this is nothing new to them. And the fact that it is a nation and a country of morals. The fact that at one point when you see the Israeli soldiers, when they killed Sinwar, who is a person, that evilest person on the existing planet, who raped, killed children and so on. Once he died, they put him in a bag, they carry him out. That's it. If this guy was Saddam Hussein of others, and how you've seen how the nation in the Middle East will deal with such a criminal and such a terrorist, they will destroy him on the streets. They will drag him into the street. But guess what? You have morals and you have values that humanity should learn from. In regarding to my story, and I have to leave. We had a family who were Iraqi Jews who run away from the Farhud and the form of kind of Holocaust that they had on their area. And the lady who was our neighbor, when I was 13 years old, she was cooking in UAE, in Dubai. She was cooking challah, and she was bringing it every Shabbat to us, and we were smelling it. Got a belly at that stage after a while. So yeah, that's where it came through challah. Rather than anything else.
I love it.
Have to leave.
Food brings us together. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Right.
Inshallah. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. Boaz, if I can just for a second, I think I'm sure there's folks who are probably going to be watching this and saying, oh, that's just, a token guy who's coming on. He doesn't represent the broad views. We held a normalization conference through the Atlantic Council in Abu Dhabi in early 2023, before October 7th, and going to the Abrahamic family house. He was just mentioned the president's going to see tomorrow. We had probably about 50 Israeli citizens who came from various sectors in society and government, folks from a number of Arab and Muslim countries around the world who came and participated. And that sentiment that he expressed is one that we found consistent the entire time we were there. And for our Israeli colleagues who were present, I think it was kind of shocking, because for forever, Israel's sort of been isolated in many ways, right? They haven't been able to travel in the region and whatnot, problem solving on their own. And it was the first time that we saw a real breakthrough on that level, topically, for the different things that were being discussed. In that case, it was food, water, energy security. And what he expressed, again, that sentiment was, it's true. I mean, I saw it across the board. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were listening. If you haven't traveled, if you haven't been to Abu Dhabi or Dubai, that is not, a lone sentiment that he was expressing there. That is a community-wide one. It's truly amazing to see.
I love it. I love it. I believe the very next person who's going to have to leave us is Dan, who I believe, Dan, you're in Poland right now. Is that right? So what is it you're doing over there in Poland? Is it related at all to what we're doing? And can you give me an idea of, since you were running Sharaka and you're still on their board, give me an idea of what you're doing now and your outlook as to where things are going over the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months.
Sure, thanks, Boaz. And it's nice seeing many, many old friends here, meeting a few new ones, but most, I think I'm pretty close with at least half the people here. So it's good to see them. A bit of a class reunion effect here. No, I'm here. I'm working on a very interesting project, setting up a new Middle East media project that's going to attempt, I know it's ambitious, but I only like things that are ambitious, to do kind of a counter Al Jazeera media platform to give a voice to the moderate Middle East and to aggressively go after and expose radical elements in the Middle East, especially in a Western facing way. There really just isn't enough of that today. So I'm busy setting that up in kind of a new media model. And some of my partners here are in Europe. Look, the past couple of years have been, I think, challenging for all of us here who are actively in the peace building, the dialogue, the interfaith, and of course the Abraham Accords space. Momentum was moving along very, very nicely prior to October 7th. When I started in these efforts, it was even prior to Sharaka, and then I joined Sharaka a bit later. It dawned on me the depth of this challenge. I don't think Israelis or especially American Jews really understand the depth of the challenge, the depth of not just ignorance or fear, which is what Jews and Israelis usually tend to have towards the Arab and Muslim world, but deep, deep misinformation, a vilification, demonization of Israel, of the Jewish people, an entire fabricated history that has almost no bearing to how we think of ourselves. And so the process was turned out to be, from my humble perspective, a lot longer and more complicated. And we were making good progress. I think the Abraham Accords were a massive, massive opening, a massive normalization by the UAE, and then Bahrain and Morocco on the other side of the region came in. And these were huge doors that were opened. And then October 7th, it could have been a moment, on the one hand, where every moderate Arab, every moderate Muslim, every leader of the Abraham Accords countries would have been able to stand up and say, this is wrong, this is not Islam, this is not our way. And what you saw was a lot of waffling, a lot of hesitation, a lot of, yes, but we condemn the Israeli, genocide and et cetera. And then you saw the power of the Hamas propaganda, which was hats off to them. It's a masterclass in the depths of cynicism and media manipulation and how it just played into, how the mainstream media played into the hands of it. And yet we continue to pace. I think what we saw is it separated the wheat from the chaff a little bit about who are the real people committed to peace. I can tell you, I continued to run Sharaka until October of 24. We had nonstop delegations, but it's a different character of people. It was journalists, it was academics, it was committed peacemakers. We continued to run our Holocaust and anti-Semitism education program. So it was kind of the fair weather fans kind of drifted away and into the background, and the people who were really committed to peace and to combating radicalization in their own societies are the ones who stepped up. And I think it had an element. I'll kind of stop talking because there's a lot of us here on the call. But one of the things that was wonderful to see and truly inspiring is that, first of all, you can see my Muslim friends' faces here, and they're the ones who absolutely were committed in the most public way, and they took a lot of heat for it. I know with Ahmed here and with Soraya, I did a lot of work over the last year. I've worked with Chama in the past. They take a lot of heat in their own societies, in their communities online for sure, and many, many other friends and allies that I've worked with or hosted. But it's really important to say that the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco doubled down on the Abraham Accords, and they didn't pull back their ambassadors, and trade, as much as it was, continued to pace. I can tell you from Morocco, we had nonstop delegations coming from Morocco with the a blessing of the government, at least, that the people-to-people engagement continued. Business and strategic delegations continued with the Gulf countries, and that's, I think it's a very important message. And I hope very soon we'll find a way, and I think this needs to be a regional approach for a ceasefire, a lasting ceasefire that really takes Hamas out of the equation. That's the most important thing that can come out of this. If Hamas is left in power, then we're going to have this again. Maybe not in a year, but in 2 or 3 or 4 years. I think the region understands this. And after this Trump visit now to the Gulf, I'm incredibly hopeful for some kind of regional package, a regional approach that can make serious headway, kind of in a grand bargain fashion, and certainly bring the Saudis in, but also the Syrians. I see progress in Lebanon that I would not have expected prior to a year ago. Overall, I'm generally hopeful for this region. I feel like the people in the Middle East might seem to understand the threats of radicalism more than many of those marching in campuses closer to your home.
Ironic. By the way, a targeted brief thing, but Dan Khan, who used to help run the Muslim American Leadership Alliance and now is the CEO of American Peace Committee, he actually wanted me to ask you, Dan, when your next delegation to Israel is happening.
Whenever he wants to come. I'll reach out to him.
Okay, very lovely. Most questions come from, people like yourselves and like Dan, by the way. So I will try to acknowledge who's asking things. I do want to encourage all of you to feel free to be less formal. Feel free to interrupt each other and interrupt me. And, I'm going to try to avoid having anybody at any given point sort of speak for 5 minutes at a time. But I am trying to prioritize people who have to go sooner, obviously, which is why I'm trying to do it that way. I want to
Boaz, may I say something
Soraya, go
about
ahead.
Dan and Abdullah?
Please, and Mazel Tov to your daughter's graduation.
Thank
yes,
you.
go ahead.
It's particularly about Dan Feferman, his work, and Abdullah Antepli. My father would always say, when a cup is full, you cannot pour anything into that until the person who holds the cup empties something. And what we find in the Middle East and across a broad spectrum of Muslims, they're not willing to empty the cup to fill something different. So what Abdullah and what Dan have done is to plant a seed. I wouldn't be here if not for the both of them. So people like us who are working in this field of normalizing relationships and advancing the Abraham Accords, it's very important that we plant a seed. Because of Abdullah, I had my first trip to Israel, and I hope he continues to offer those trips, the Muslim Leadership Initiative. And thereafter, Dan, I keep saying he's a brother from another mother. We have successive trips to Israel, Poland, and my knowledge of this conflict has grown deeper and broader. So just to say, we have to all plant those seeds, no matter how difficult it is. Thank you.
That's lovely. I don't think I've ever heard a formal Muslim woman say brother from another mother. I love it though. So yeah, it really is cool to be able to have this conversation. Yaara and I talked about this in last year in the fall during Sukkot, and we were talking about, well, this would be a good time now. The elections, well, maybe we should wait until Trump has taken power. So maybe we should wait until the end of January is a great time. But then the end of January came and lots of executive orders and he wasn't doing his Middle East trips. Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait, because there kept being things happening. We ended up choosing this as a good date because it seems like, all right, everything seems like this is a good time to talk in perspective. And little did we know that today on May 15th, 2015, Trump is literally there about to meet with one of the participants. It's kind of wild,
Talk about
as they
timing
say.
is everything, Boaz.
Yeah, man makes plans and God laughs, as many of us know that expression. Now, but I love this. How many people on this, how many people out of our 14 people are Muslim out of curiosity, right? There's Shama and Soraya and Ahmed and Ahmed and Abdullah and Amjad. I think that's 6. I love it. I love that it's about half. And is anybody on this chat Christian or non-denominational? I don't know. I don't know if Alex, you are fascinating. Mr. Sievers, are you Jewish yourself? I never even asked you.
Yes, I am.
You are Jewish. Yeah,
Every Muslim is a default Christian with a small c.
Christian with a small c.
There's a lot of Jesus business in Islam as well.
It's very interesting. But I love that. I love that we've gathered together as friends to talk about
You know,
this.
that's a good thing to say. Every Muslim is also Jewish because we actually, when Islam began, started out, every Muslim used to join his Jewish or their Jewish neighbor to pray toward Jerusalem and toward the temple. And that continued like for several, I don't know, for a year or two before Muslims really shifted to Mecca. So you know, every Muslim is really part Christian and part Jewish. You know, that's a I don't know who said it, you know, but that's really a very interesting thing to say.
When did that
challenge
shift?
is always getting people to become aware of it, and they don't want to believe it oftentimes.
Yeah, exactly. And surprisingly, because the Quran is like 1/3, almost half, is about the Jewish people, is about Allah saying how He chose the people of Israel for that land, and it's all mentioned in the Quran, and it's just so strange how all of that got convoluted in the populist politics of early 20th century, and it was just overtaken all of that history. And even now, when a few of the learned people of Islam, a couple of Palestinians I know, a couple of Pakistanis, a couple of Egyptians, when they say the truth is in the Quran and it's about peace between Muslims and Jews and accepting Israel, a lot of people really don't know about this. You know, it's really interesting.
When did it change that we went from toward davening, praying towards Jerusalem? When did it shift to going towards Mecca? That's a fascinating piece of history I wasn't aware of.
Yes, I mean it's I can, you know, talk about that, you know, for you know, endlessly, but you know, just very briefly, it was at the very beginning of Islam when Allah basically, and every Muslim believes that, when Allah basically said to Prophet Muhammad, you need to pray toward Jerusalem. And so it was Jews in that region, Arabia, and Muslims praying toward Jerusalem. And it continued, I'm not sure exactly for how long, but it continued until at some point Prophet Muhammad said basically, God or Allah, you gave Moses a direction to pray. You gave Jesus or Isa a certain direction and way of prayer. And I would like also as a prophet to have my own way. So if you can give me my own direction to pray, for example, and that's how Mecca came about. You know,
Actually,
there
Ahmed,
are a
can I
number
add
of
something to that?
stories about that, but that's the story basically.
Yeah, if I could add something to that, please. Part of the 5 pillars of Islam is that you have to believe in God. That's number 1. Number 2, believe in his angels, his books, and his prophets. So another way, I believe, to add on what Ahmed said, is that in order for you to be a Muslim, you have to be a Jew and a Christian in order to be a Muslim. If not, I don't think there's a way over that, because basically our holy book, I'm not saying it copied the previous books, but basically if you read it, it's almost identical, almost, especially when it comes to the prophet's stories. It's the same story from just a different angle, just like somebody else was narrating it. We believe in the same angels, we believe in the same prophets, except that we have one more. That's it. From Christians, from Jews, we have 2 more. That's it. So there are many similarities that we're not focusing on.
I will just point out one thing that I told Soraya. which is that, most of the world's image of Jews and Muslims is basically the equivalent of Israelis and Hamas. Right? That's their perspective, right? Jews and Muslims means clash and war, even though historically there have been eons and generations of people over the years where Jews were much happier and better off living in Islamic societies than in Christian societies, as many of us know. But in terms of today's day and age, I just want to point out that doesn't actually, not only does that not have to be the way, that often isn't the way, right? I will tell you that one of the most meaningful things that happened to me after October 7th was a private, long voice message I got on WhatsApp from my dear friend in Chicago, who is a middle-aged Muslim religious lawyer. I mean, religious, she will not shake hands. She is a very religious woman. And she left me a long voice message telling me, Boaz, I love you, and I cannot tell you how much it breaks my heart what happened, and I'm crying for the people and for the innocents in Israel that happened, and she's done missions. So I just want to say her name is Sakina, her husband is Imtiaz. That's what I want people to focus on, is the humanity of the good individuals out there, not the horrible, horrible people that shine through loudly on social media and on the college campuses, because they suck up so much energy and airspace, and they make much better news coverage, that's what the image becomes, and it reinforces that must be the only relationship between Jew and Muslim. But it's unfortunately doesn't just misrepresent it, it makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy. It gets people who might otherwise not have formulated their opinions, who are Muslim and Jews, to now even more likely hate each other, because I guess that's what's happening. This is what all Muslims are like. This is what all Jews are like. So it's extremely important for people to try to have those interpersonal relationships, like I have with each of you, like I hope to continue with each of you. I really encourage anybody watching this to try to actually realize, to stop just lumping people in as one, but try to have individual relationships and realize that. Thank you.
So just to add to your point, and I hope you can hear well, what you just said is, we felt a lot also in Israel on October 7th. I received and I know a lot of my other Israeli friends received so many texts and voice notes and calls sometimes from friends of ours from the Abraham Accords countries, and sympathizing and expressing how shocked they are from what is happening. And that is just another point to look at and think about when we are talking about how big of a gap there is between what people in a lot of Western countries think is actually happening in the region versus what's actually happening in the region. We are living a very different reality from what the perception is very often. That's been my...
I want to add to that, if I may.
Chama, please.
Of course, we started with this long kind of reflection on religion and what we have in common and where we differ. And to your point, Boaz, it's really important to remind people of the rich past of Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, with all of its complexity and nuance, of course. But essentially, I exist to really shatter a lot of those stereotypes and those perceived notions about how Jews and Muslims are not supposed to live together. You've already introduced me as a Muslim. I would say I relate to Muslim culture because I grew up in it. My mother is Muslim, but because my father is ethnically Jewish, I also identify as Jewish. And it took me a very long time to understand that, even as someone who has been dedicated to peace building and bringing Muslims and Jews together and advocating for Jewish representation and visibility across the Middle East since I was a kid. And why? Because we've had a legacy of teaching Jewishness and Jewish peoplehood as solely based on religion and religiosity and religious belonging. And so it really took for me to be in Jewish American spaces and then to be in Israel for my identity to actually make sense and for this process of like full integration of who I am to make sense and to really, for me to really resonate with what I already knew in my bones, which is Zionism. And to see it represented so beautifully and to see all of the diversity and the pluralism, essentially that Israel has condensed all the pluralism of the entire region that has been condensed into a very tiny plot of land that tells a beautiful story about the past thousands of years of Middle Eastern history and migration and cross-pollination and things like that. The Abraham Accords, just to kind of bring this back to the reason why we're here, for me as someone who has held hands with both cultures and communities my whole life, represented a really powerful shift. And that shift for me was the creation of a new foundation for belonging in the Middle East and North Africa for both Jews and Muslims, and specifically for moderates and people who are future thinking and wanted to transcend and move beyond the conflicts to actually build something useful and helpful out of the Middle East and to revive and renew the culture of civilizational wealth that we know and we've had across the Middle East, across different city-states and dynasties, etc. And so for me, the Abraham Accords set up the architecture for new ways of belonging, and so fascinating actually seeing what is unfolding in the UAE today and how different Trump's experience is and has been in the UAE for his first day compared to his experience of Saudi or Doha. Because as soon as he comes in, he visits Sheikh Zayed Mosque. There is a communication of the values of moderation, pluralism, diversity, of religious pluralism and acceptance and religious freedom that is so well communicated and integrated into everything that Trump is doing just purely by going around Abu Dhabi. And so that's a really powerful model and a powerful story to package for the rest of the Middle East, because immediately it gives a new model for belonging for other Muslims and other Arabs that distances itself from decades of, I think maybe Ahmed pointed to this, decades of supremacist fascist ideology that really was the result of late 19th and early 20th, mostly European supremacist thinking that was imported into the Middle East. And so not only are we getting that model, and we're creating almost fear of missing out for other countries, but we're also exporting another model to the West where we're saying you don't have to be an extremist Islamist to be representative of the Middle East, of Islam, of the Arab world. And that's necessary given how our Western institutions, specifically democratic and liberal institutions, have been totally infiltrated by Islamists. We're extremely sophisticated in packaging a story about the Middle East where the moderates are oppressive and dictatorial, and the only democratic forces happen to be Islamist.
Guys, I have to jump off, but again, I really enjoy listening to all of you, and I'll catch the rest of this after it airs. But thanks for having me on, and good seeing everybody.
Yeah, keep it up, Dan. You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job, and just thumbs up to you and whatever you're doing. Keep it up.
We'll talk. Thank you.
You're changing the region.
We all are.
I want to. Bye, Dan.
Dan, we'll definitely talk. Bye.
I'd like to follow up with the student perspective on that. Right after October 7th, this is on the basis of people more on the left-hand side. I lost all of my Western friends who were just social activists, political activists, etc. And the only friend that wasn't Jewish that I still have to this day, and the only friendship that remained stronger, was one of my friends who is a Muslim and she's Persian. Her family escaped Iran, and her and I stood side by side on a street corner, advocating against terrorism, advocating for peace, and advocating for all of those things. And additionally, when I'm on my campus, I see that firsthand. I see how how a lot of people who just don't understand the Middle East, don't understand how Western society has been infiltrated, they just do not get it. I was explaining to them about this trip that I went on, which is why I'm here. This trip basically cultivates and takes 40 students from across the United States, a cohort of 40 students, to Israel and the UAE, basically focusing on the Abraham Accords and letting us as students see it happen in real time and take that experience and bring it back to our campuses and teach people about these experiences, teach people about coexistence and about peace and about even just tolerance and etc. And the answer I got back from a lot of students, from a lot of the leftist students, was that, well, the UAE is just a trader. They just trade to the Muslim people. And that was the response I got. It's very sad to understand that, to have that told to me when I'm discussing this whole program is about to cultivate peace. It's about to cultivate normalization, rationalization between everyone.
Boaz, if I can add something here, perhaps just trying to put some more colors.
Nobody needs permission to talk. You have permission as a blank check, all of you. You just interrupt me or anybody. Go ahead, please, Nir.
So just to make sure we're not going to paint everything just with rosy colors. I think if I were to follow up on Chama, the fact that she can say what she's saying in a place like the UAE is also because the UAE is a certain island. If Chama now would have tried to do the same thing in Egypt or in Jordan, or if your friend that you've met, Ethan, would have tried to do the same thing in Iran, I don't think that you would have had the same thing and the same type of reaction. In 621, when the night journey, Isra and then Mi'raj took place, which is connected to why Jerusalem is important, was also a part of a political attempt to put Jerusalem in the center and get the Jewish tribes in Saudi Arabia to join and follow Muhammad. Some actually did, but many did not. That did not end up so well. Not all of our history was I would say, rosy as we had hoped it would be. I mean, you know, Imam and Antepli can tell us more, because a lot of his work is about trying to bridge and trying to cling into the hearts. Certainly, you know, in the Abraham Accords, it's the tradition of Abraham and then his sons, Isaac and Ishmael. We can go back to the text and find the fact that the early days were not days of animosity. They went to bury their father together. There is a Jewish tradition that Abraham actually marries Hagar after Sarah dies. The beginning was may have been more positive, but thereafter it wasn't always that positive. That's partially why the Abraham Accords were so important. On the other hand, of course, sometimes we tend to look at the world through really Jews versus Muslims, Israelis versus Arabs, and we tend to forget that there are 450 million Arabs and 1.6 or even more billion Muslims. And of course, they don't all think alike. And when it comes to a country like the UAE, and now we think we're seeing this in a few other countries in the Gulf, but it also comes to a country like Morocco that Chama is very familiar with. We see that tradition of tolerance that was more embedded in the society, and therefore these were the countries from which some of what we're seeing now as political tolerance emerged. And part of that is because there is a fear within these societies that what they have built is going to be destroyed, because the radicals who stand against this ideologically, and the radicals who would not buy the, I would say, broadly speaking, the liberal interpretation that we have, began to speak about when it comes to the text, are the ones who wants to destroy it. And in a country like the UAE, which is an island, it's also a country that treats this very seriously, and they would not let the streams of more radical streams to speak. An imam who would say the wrong things in a mosque is not going to be allowed to speak, because that's going to violate the social order. And it's important to understand that it's not so easy to just be moderate. Sometimes you literally have to fight for it.
Boaz, may I come in on that point?
Anytime. Yes, go ahead.
That Nir just made. Look, how to put this? this is I'm sitting here in Abu Dhabi. I've been here throughout this whole period. I came a year after the Abraham Accords were signed, but really opened our office from nothing. And I've been here through the post-October 7th and everything else that's shaken this relationship. And the remarkable thing is that it has survived and thrived. And I would like to echo what Dan said about how important that is as an achievement. But there's also a challenge, and we look at the rhetoric of much of the social media, what we see in the demonstrations in university campuses, but also in major cities in the West, where this is not about, protesting Israeli policy. This is about advocating the elimination of Israel. There is a huge challenge that we all face, and we have. It's so important that we have partners here like Amjad and people who will stand up and are all of the participants, the Arab and Muslim participants in this discussion, who will stand up against that. But that is a very powerful force in the world, and I think we until October 7th, maybe we didn't anticipate how much those kind of hateful ideas had spread and taken root in really, in key institutions, including elite universities and medical schools and places that law schools and places that I certainly didn't expect that to be the case. So it's extremely important that we engage and partner with our friends because we value them so much, and we need their support and their understanding. Stop.
I want to shift this to very focused things about the Abraham Accords, which is of course why we're here. I do want to just say one thing to also what Nir had said himself, which is, the basics being that, like, we have our rosy look and we have our depressing look, and as with most things, it's a gray area, and really very much it's not just about Muslims feel this way, or Arabs feel this way. There's also a huge culture within each society, right? There's a huge difference, as we say, between a Muslims, even between Palestinians in the West Bank versus Palestinians in Gaza, there's a difference, right? So one interesting tidbit that I will tell you is that I had a wonderful episode, one of these, with Palestinians who are specifically Palestinians bravely speaking out for peace, and you probably follow all of them. Yasmin Mohammed, Ahmed Fuad Al-Khatib, John Aziz, Hamza Hawadi, right? Mo Howie. So it was a really great episode that you might be interested in watching if you haven't. But here's the reason I'm bringing it up. At one point, we talked about something along these lines, and I said, wait a second, out of curiosity, because I know the answer isn't going to be Iran, I said, what's the nation that you most would just stereotype as just like throw a dart and most people truly hate Jews, hate Israelis? And I knew it wasn't Iran, because Iran, as we all know, is not represented by its government at all. And you want to know what their answer was? Then they all agreed very quickly. They actually said Egypt. That was their answer. They said Egypt. They were like, yep, Israel has peace with Egypt. They were like, there's no country that hates Israel and Israelis and Jews more than Egyptians. And this was said by the words of my Palestinian guests. I thought that was kind of fascinating. But my point of this isn't to throw Egyptians under the bus at all. My point of saying this is saying you can't just lump people together, right? You just can't. There's huge cultural shifts. There's probably differences between Jews in Los Angeles, where I live, versus Jews in New York. We have different lived experiences and different attitudes. So I thought that was interesting.
Sorry, were you about to shift into something else? Because I wanted to kind of pick up between what you were saying and Mark and Nir.
Go ahead and say something. I never want to stop people, but obviously I want the focus to shift soon to the Accords.
Well, this is about it's about that. So I won't go like too deep into my story and all this, but I guess maybe an observation that I've had while pursuing, the idea of really like what I consider mutually beneficial relationships, in terms of business and in terms of that between cultures of the region. And what I've realized, and it's even when I'm hearing in the conversation here, and I'm curious, especially for Ahmed, Chama, Abdullah, and Ahmed, like so many of us in the Jewish camp. I mean, I'm currently in Tel Aviv. I was living in LA. It feels that anytime there's an opportunity for peace or an allyship with Israel or the Jewish people, we clamor towards those people like they're our savior. And when I was pursuing this initiative, and speaking with some pretty high ups in Riyadh at one point, as well as in Dubai, and then even in Dubai 2 months ago, having very intimate meetings with some, influential people. And the difference is the Jews that I know seem to be coming at this partnership and relationship from a do or die situation. And it's that if people, and Jews, please argue, please, I don't want to represent everyone, but the feeling that I get from whether it's social media, whether it's why Boaz is having any of us on this call at all, we feel that we are in this situation that's not just, a vicious fight within Israel and its surrounding borders, but this identity fight that is really, really globalized and scary, that if we don't get a hold of it soon enough, it could get too big and become what we don't want to see from a repeat of the 30s and 40s in Europe. Whereas what I've found in speaking with people in Riyadh, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, my trip to Dubai was one of the most life-changing things. It was an incredible experience, and I hope Jews and other people get to go experience that, and I want to see other places in the region as well, is that there's a desire for Saudi and Dubai to kind of globalize their economy, diversify, their cultural import and export thing. And if that also means creating a relationship with Israel or Jews, great, And I'm curious, from a Muslim standpoint or an Arab standpoint, is there any urgency culturally, or are we coming at this whole thing from a completely different side, at least from a cultural aspect? I don't know, Boaz, if that's way too far off where you wanted to go with it.
Please, and can somebody chime in who has an opinion?
Fascinating.
Yeah,
this is fascinating. Yeah.
So go ahead, Shama, go ahead and tell us what your thoughts are.
I would argue there is urgency to various degrees, but in order to actually understand this, you have to understand what led to the Abraham Accords in the first place. Mm-hmm. It was the environment of the Arab Spring, the repercussions from the Arab Spring, the emboldening of these Islamist terrorist organizations across the board, and how well they could organize and mobilize to overthrow legacy governments overnight. That was the fundamental sort of shock to the system that made the leadership in the region look around and realize, wow, the enemy has grown much bigger than we thought possible. And now we are facing an existential threat. So the Arab Spring was kind of the existential moment that in some ways Israel's having an existential moment, post October 7th. But the Arab Spring was that for specifically moderate monarchies across the region. And there's a lot there, for example, very much following what unfolded in Manama in Bahrain, the monarchies of the region decided to create an alliance that extended beyond the Gulf to Jordan and Morocco. I mean, Morocco is so far away, but they were actively trying to think, how can we recalibrate relationships to create alliances to guard ourselves from these forces that are threatening not just our survival, but the very fabric of our societies. And so I would say the urgency is there and was there, and that's why we've had incredible leadership in terms of counter-extremism, designating Hamas and other terrorist organizations. It's since 2013, 2014 by the UAE and others. And so that's what led, to Nir's point. There was this sort of cleaning up that took place in places like the UAE and others that paved the way for the year of tolerance in the UAE and then to the Abraham Accords. Now, of course, in terms when we think about this from the Jewish perspective, we as Jews, we don't have the numbers, right? It's always going to be outnumbered, which means we always have to innovate and go beyond what is actually available and accessible and even conceivable to be able to have an impact that can actually meet the challenge. And the challenge is, like Nir said, massive radicalization that has taken a hold of the country, that has taken the spirit, the culture of the country, of the region as hostage. So no one can even think beyond their narrow identities that were prefabricated and labeled and packaged for public consumption. What I mean by these identities, not to go back, but it is the reason why Egypt is so radical. It is that intersection of Pan-Arabism and Islamist ideology. Egypt was essentially the heartland of Pan-Arabism across the region through Gamal Abdel Nasser and other architects of Pan-Arabism that made it their raison d'etre to oppress and persecute Jews in order to promote a Pan-Arab sort of identity or sort of nation or an illusion of a nation. And Egypt is also the former headquarters, but also the source of the Muslim Brotherhood. And so we've had two very toxic ideologies that have completely sought to marginalize not just ethnic and religious minorities and indigenous people across the region, but to marginalize any other any moderate voice. And so in the absence of that, it becomes really difficult to actually de-radicalize society. But what does? What de-radicalizes a society like that has had an intersection of these ideologies, completely zoomed into Israel, the destruction of Israel, the project of destroying Israel, because it exists as kind of this continuation of the white colonizing empire in the imaginary consciousness of the Muslim Arab. Because of that, the only way to actually de-radicalize is to normalize with Israel. And that is, yeah.
Chama, if I may just add to you, we actually need Israel. I mean, if you ask me, somebody whose name is Ahmed and who is from Islamabad in Pakistan, if you ask me, what's your interest in seeing peace between Muslims and Jews and Israel and Arab and Muslim states? I'll tell you, yes, we can talk about tolerance and integration and economy and politics, but just to Zach's point, actually we need Israel to defeat our demons. Every ideology that has wrecked Arab and Muslim states in the 20th and early 21st century has something to do or is linked in some way to fighting Israel. So it's as you mentioned, the Arabists, the Arab nationalists, the Islamists, and the Arab leftists, both communist and socialist. And before any of my commie and socialist friends go, after me, I'll just say I respect all of them.
Right.
But I'm talking about the violent version. So in the wider Middle East, we had violent communist and socialist, Arab nationalists, and Islamists. And all of the three actually combined came together on one point, which is we need to destroy and fight Israel. And for that, we need to redo all of the Arab and Muslim societies here. And the project that they began 100 years ago resulted in Libya, in Iraq, in Syria, in Hezbollah in Lebanon, in Houthis in Yemen, maybe Taliban, maybe the Islamists in Pakistan, maybe others. And finally, it ended up with the grand peace presentation, which is Gaza. The Gaza represents, I mean, I don't want to sound cynic. It's a huge tragedy what happened in Gaza. But Gaza represents exactly the pinnacle of this project that began almost 100 years ago, where the Arab communists and socialists the Arab nationalists and the Arab Islamists created this whole populist idea that, you know, we need to fight Israel, and for that we need to radicalize each and every. So now, if you ask me why we need to normalize why we need Israel, actually, why we need Israel and to be normal with Israel, and Zach, this is an answer to your question. Why I need? I mean, I live in Islamabad, I live in Dubai, I live somewhere else. I mean, I'm not living in Tel Aviv, I'm not living in Jerusalem, but I need for Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Israel to thrive and to be at peace in order for me to defeat the violent Islamists, the violent Arab nationalists, and the violent Arab socialist and leftist fronts and movements and whatnot that destroyed our minds before they destroyed really our societies. I hope that answers your question.
That's an incredible perspective. I wanted to point out, though, coming from this as an ignoramus who's just reading the newspaper, which really means my feed on my phone these days, right? The main reason behind it, and I kind of want to hear from Ahmed and Abdullah, who haven't spoken yet, if one of you wants to answer this, what most people are going to read about. Why? This is also to answer Zach's point. Why is there urgency for Saudi Arabia to join? Do they feel urgency? If I had to answer this from reading the news, from reading CNN, it basically comes down to one simple fact, which is, yeah, Saudi Arabia needs Israel because they need more protection against Iran. That's all it comes down to in the news. They're afraid of Iran. They want Israel to help them protect against Iran. And as soon as Saudi Arabia joins the accords, there's a domino of other countries that'll be ready to join. So now, I'm not telling you that's the case. I'm telling you that's the perceived situation. Okay, so what I want to know is that true? Because none of that was what Chama or Ahmed were saying. You were giving much more nuanced answers, which is why I have you on. So what is the actual reality in terms of, like, do they give a shit about Iran and therefore they need Israel and still just like the enemy of man?
It sounds like Israel is the best uniter of all the Arabs. You said the Arab nationalists, the Arab Islamists, and the Arab communists all united just for Israel. So I'm just kidding. Not the real answer.
I think it's a lot more complicated than that. If I may respond to quite a few comments already being said and also add my own, I really appreciate Ahmed Quraishi's passionate sort of appeal, and I totally agree that those kind of cancerous evil ideologies that has emerged within the Muslim majority societies is cancerous, poisonous. They are destroying Islam within before it becomes a threat to Jews or Israel or anybody else. But I think I have a slightly different take that in order to defeat those civilizational decay that these emerging ideologies, violent extremist interpretation, it requires a lot more work than just allying with Israel or Israel. I think we need Israel global work, but the work is internally needs to be done by the Muslim communities. I would temper the potential contribution of Israel's relationship or normalization with the region, because after all, we are dealing with centuries-long civilizational decline and civilizational collapse that Muslim societies are going through. It requires a civilizational rise in every possible way. If civilization doesn't redeem itself and gain its own health economically, socially, politically, culturally, as well as religiously, it's going to take some time. Look at dark ages of Christianity when they were experiencing their own dark ages, what it took centuries long. So I was one of the people publicly skeptical and critical of the Abraham Accord. I think it's an incredible opportunity for us. And I was skeptical. I had very little expectation. And Zorba, answering your question directly, there is a sense of urgency, but not in the same way that the Jews and Israelis are feeling. Jewish communities are trying to set up a shop in the heart of Islam and Muslims. As a small minority, I don't think it is as existential for many Muslim communities as it is for the Jews and Israel. And Muslims have options and opportunities and alternatives. I can totally see, inshallah, if regime changes in Iran, Muslims are sort of looking for other options, as the United States and other countries are going into many different directions. But I think it is, you're right, existential. But there is a sense of urgency. There's a sense of urgency emerging out of being sick and tired of the bloodshed, being sick and tired of the endless wars. And you would have, and everybody would have seen much more visible manifestation of that urgency if it wasn't for the far-right government in Israel, if it wasn't for the prolonged war in Gaza and the tens of thousands of innocent lives. You would have seen it more, because what you are seeing, despite far-right government in Israel, despite Trump administration in America, despite tens of thousands of civilian tragic casualties in Gaza, innocent Palestinians dying, still most people are behaving and nobody's leaving the room. Abraham Accord is, like, if this could have happened 10 years ago, you would have seen any accord would have been gone. Ambassadors would have been called, diplomatic relations would be called out. It is telling you in an indirect way, not a maybe a sense of urgency in the way that you are describing, but a deeper commitment. Let's make this work. We are sick and tired of this status quo. It's not helping to anybody. It's not helping the Jews. It's not helping the Muslims. And Abraham Accord gave everybody, including myself, a glimpse of what's possible. What could be if things go in the right direction, at least for a while. I was incredibly skeptical and critical of Abraham Accord because I have very little to no respect to people who signed it, or I didn't believe in their integrity, that they were really sincere about bringing our communities together, other than forming cold peace like they do with Egypt, Jordan, Turkey. It was government to government. And most of these people, especially in the highest levels, they deserve why I think so low of them. But despite them, not because of them, because of the innocent, innate goodness of humanity and the people of all backgrounds, there is a real testimony that people want to make this work. And I would love to see, like, in what way we can really bounce back from where we are, especially if and when the war goes on. I apologize to Jason Greenblatt, Tal Becker, anybody who's involved with Abraham Accord for my initial skepticism. But I'm publicly apologizing, saying I was wrong. I was underestimating what has built in terms of Muslim, Arab, Jewish goodwill. That is not, unfortunately, reflected in Israeli government, not at all. If anything, they are moving things in the opposite direction. It is not reflected in current American administration, but still the integrity and the decency of the people is holding things. So I would love us to brainstorm in what way, as these bad faith actors, direct or indirectly, trying to sabotage Abraham Accord, they wouldn't care less if it just falls apart. They want economic benefit, they want strategic benefit, they want geopolitical benefit. But in terms of peace, in terms of ending hatred, ending extremism, which is emerging in Israel itself. I mean, Ahmed, I agree with you, Habibi. We have to get rid of these horrible, hating, racist, extremist Muslims. But what we are seeing in Israel is the Jewish versions of those cancers emerging. Jewish version of those extremist ideologies are becoming a lot more powerful. Meir Kahane, when he was in the Knesset in 1980s, he was just one person. And when he spoke, far right, far left, everybody left the room. They were never given a platform. There was no legitimacy whatsoever. Just let me finish 1 second.
Yeah,
and
sure.
then now you see, like, ministers, they are proposing legislations to implement some of the horrific racist ideologies to emerge in the United States, in Israel and elsewhere. So what we need is to invest in this seemingly unshakable but not unlimited resilience of the Jewish people, Arabs, Palestinians, Muslims in the region, and really intensify efforts. In many ways, that's what I've been putting a lot of my eggs and a lot of my investment. How can we make Israeli university students and faculty engage with their counterparts in the United States as well as in this Abraham Accord places? How can we, even before joining Saudi Arabia, Saudi opening, Saudi transformation, Vision 2030, can at least start some cultural, educational, and civilizational connection with Israeli and Jewish institutions and organizations that even without formally, because geopolitical atmosphere is not allowing Saudis to join, but there is no reason why they can't still do joint research, student exchange program, faculty exchange program. I would love us to just do whatever we can. We are not politicians, we are not military people, we are civil society influencers. Let's gain enough hearts and minds in the civic society independently from the government, because what I see, governments both in Israel and the United States, in so many ways, they want the material economic benefit of Abraham Accord, but they are not doing at best what Abraham Accord could do to bring the sustainable peace. Another important aspect, which I'm surprised and somewhat disappointed that it didn't come. For anybody who thinks we can circumvent Palestinian suffering, for anybody who thinks without an independent, functional, independent Palestinian state, that Israel region or any kind of regional maneuvers, we can just ignore very legitimate human suffering, partially caused by their own leaders, partially caused by their own terrorist organizations, cult of death like Hamas and Hezbollah. But we have to find a political solution to the Palestinian suffering. Without that nation gaining back its own integrity, humanity, and decency, neither Israel nor the region will ever have sustainable peace. Otherwise, if you forget human suffering like October 7, they have their own horrific and evil ways of reminding us that they are still there, unfortunately. Therefore, before they go to these evil, illegitimate, indefensible strategies to tell the world that they are suffering, we have to create avenues, economic, social, political, religious, ideological, ethical, and moral, to deal with that suffering in a legitimate and ethical and moral way.
No, I think, Abdullah, you raised a couple of very valid points. And I think everything kind of gets munged together, and there are things that sort of need to be separated out. In previous capacity, before the Atlantic Council on 7 initiative and getting involved in normalization efforts, I had the unfortunate experience of having to do some of the propaganda analysis on the ISIS videos and Al-Qaeda and seeing what that looked like. And then I watched the video of the 10/7 attack. And I was going to tie back to what you said here in a minute, because I think what you raised is incredibly important for a few reasons. What I saw was probably amongst the most horrific acts of violence, and the difference between what I saw in the Al-Qaeda and the ISIS videos and what I saw in the video on 10/7. In the Al-Qaeda video, I've never seen them online, black-clad, music playing, chanting. There's a political message that's delivered of some kind, some grotesque act of violence, very serious, meant to be intimidating, and then the videos end. What I saw in the compilation of the 10/7 video was people expressing sheer joy at what they were doing, which is something I had never experienced or witnessed before. And if you look at the number of folks who would cross the border and come into Israel to conduct that attack on behalf of a terrorist organization, or two for that matter, and some who joined, that's an ideological problem. There were no strategic weapons that were really used that day. It was individuals with grenades and knives and pistols and AK-47s. It was personal in terms of what took place. And the only way you could commit acts of violence like that against unarmed civilians when you're in there, in this context and in any other context for that matter, is they have to be dehumanized. And the only way you dehumanize someone like that is through gross and vile propaganda, right? So not having the cultural exchanges, the interactions between people, bringing the societies together, foments that type of ideology, which is where the root of that type of violence comes from. And so if it's just sort of an economic-based agreement, as you were mentioning, Abdullah, right, like whether it's on 10/7 or anywhere else around the world where you see types of violence like that, it's because of hate that's fomented through propaganda. And the only way to fix that has got to be through human interaction and humanizing people that you may not agree with at the moment, or you've been taught to hate or dislike on no matter which side of an argument you're on. That's got to end, and that barrier needs to come down. The only way to do that, I think, is to your point. The problem you have too, I think, we're looking at a number of Arab or Muslim majority countries who are trying to engage on the Abraham Accords, and there's great progress that's being made across the board in discussions. As you said, there's a recognition that Hamas is a terrorist organization. What happened on 10/7 is an unspeakable terrorist attack, and separate from that, there's also a need for a Palestinian state. But there is no partner for peace inside Gaza right now. There isn't one that is sort of discernible right now within the PA, within the authority. And so it's this catch-22. And after what happened on 10/7, if you look at what happened in segments of Israeli society too, it's not just, as you mentioned, the current government and support for policy. It's kind of widespread right now in terms of moving towards a two-state solution and where the polling stands on that particular issue. So there's an issue of a gap of a credible partner right now on the ground to do that. Arab states wanting and needing to see some sort of pathway towards normalization based on the 67 borders, and the reality on the ground of not having a partner in many cases, but at the same time also needing to recognize that there is a partner and a neighbor in the Middle East that needs to be integrated into the community and in every aspect of society, as you mentioned. And so the problem is some of those interests are competing with one another, and that's where you're sort of having a problem. And everybody would like to do it all together. But as I like to remind folks when they ask, because when the war started, my next question was immediately afterwards. Okay, Hamas has been entrenched. There hasn't been elections for a long time. They're in every aspect of society inside Gaza. They're gone. What comes next? Which one of the regional governments, whether it's an autocrat, a kingdom, or a dictator, whoever it is going to pay for a democratic movement inside Gaza, which are not allowed in their own countries, to come in and then sort of do that there? The U.S. or Israel installing some sort of government wouldn't be seen as sort of credible. And so the problem is you've got a nation and state building capacity gap as well inside to sort of deal with that grand strategic problem that everybody's been facing. So if you can't tackle all those things at once, I think you made a great point, Abdullah. If you can't get there all in one shot, what can you do incrementally in between in places where that's simply not possible to sort of integrate the societies, make sure that there is interdependence from an economic perspective, culturally, et cetera, take away that barrier for hate as you work towards that pathway down the road? I mean, that's at least how I'm seeing it frame-wise. I don't know if any colleagues or friends on here see it differently, but that's at least how I'm approaching it.
Let me try to pick up on this also
please.
Before I need to unfortunately also leave for another meeting and connect a couple of dots. When I'm asked sometimes about the Abraham Accords and when they began, I usually refer to the year 2012. And why 2012? Because that's the year when Mohammed Morsi rose to power. And when Mohammed Morsi rose to power as a representative of the Muslim Brotherhood, as a part of the Arab Spring, quote unquote, there is a realization in Egypt that something may go completely wrong. The Muslim Brotherhood are the same people who assassinated Anwar Sadat in 1979. And there was a realization that if that stream that represented a movement, but also a stream of radicalization, will gain strength, what we'll see is more havoc rather than more progress. And if you zoom out, you really see two sort of axes in the Middle East, and certainly in the past couple of decades. I call them the axis of resistance, which we have known for quite some time, and the axis of renaissance, that in many ways is led by the moderate bloc, and certainly by some of the countries in the Gulf. Now, they go very much together, because most of these countries have actually designated the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organizations already in 2013 and 2014, realizing that they need to distance these voices if they want to create progress. And to Abdullah's point, it is also very clear that radicalization brings radicalization. So when you have radicalization on one side, it's also clear that you will see it on the other side. And I agree that we have also a serious challenge inside Israel when it comes to radical voices. It's not necessarily justified whether they would say, listen, but we had October 7th, but that's certainly part of the aftermath, and it will take us some time to deal with it. And of course, part of that is engagement. Another part of it is literally doing what we can do, which is sometimes not always pleasant. You need to fight some of these streams. That goes into a whole set of difficult issues involving, Gaza, involving some of the wars in Syria, and involving lots of things that are probably beyond the scope of this podcast. But none of this goes in a vacuum. But the fact that we're able to get a conversation like this here with many friends, it means that the division that we have today are not so much when it comes to countries or ethnicities. It's not so much Jews against Muslims, Israelis against Arabs, or Sunni versus Shia. It's the Renaissance against the resistance. It's people like all of us, probably on this call, who can stand on one side, realizing there are many other people who can also be Jews, Israelis, as well as Muslims, Shia or Sunni, who would stand on the radical side and who would want to do whatever they can to fight. And that's an important point, because it's something that at least we crossed. We can fight radicalization together. And in that sense, the Abraham Accords and that trend is extremely important. And I hope you will, I'm sure there's going to be more points, and I will certainly catch up on this. And thank you very much for inviting me.
I unfortunately have to leave as well. If I may just respond to a couple of points that both Nir and Alex have done. Alex, my friend, I think you and I see things differently, or we have a very different source of information. Maybe one important distinction would be, as understandable, legitimate, and even moral for someone to begin their thinking with October 7 and end it by October 15. But for those of us looking for a solution, we have to have a memory even before October 7. Like if you start the conversation from October 7, it's one thing. But if you start, you're absolutely right that hate, dehumanization among people of Gaza is in horrific levels. It's un-Islamic, it's immoral, and no human suffering justifies violence, but it explains it. Like what, if you are a Gazan, can you imagine if you're a Gazan child living the life that you would live in the last 20 years, would you expect anything different? Let's just at least sort of bring the necessary requirement. These people are not innately, just let me finish. These people are just not innately monsters. They didn't turn into some sort of a wolf in the full moon of October 7 overnight. There's a whole history of incredibly regretful, tragic human suffering. And you're absolutely
Abdullah, just to your point about dehumanization, I think we, people from our side, dehumanized the Gazans before actually anybody in Israel did. I'm not defending anyone in Israel. Your point's taken. But Hamas and Iran, when they went about to scuttle the diplomacy that that Biden and Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Palestinian Authority were executing right before October 7, and in order to scuttle it, somebody decided, I don't know where, maybe in Hamas, in Doha, or in Tehran, or somewhere else, somebody decided to push the people of Gaza who were sleeping over a weekend, who were not fighting on the streets, who were not on the trenches, and just sacrifice them in order to scuttle the diplomacy. So the dehumanization is
what I was
not
about
just
to say,
Israeli.
Ahmed.
So Abdullah, just one line.
Allow me to respond.
The dehumanization is I take your point. There are people in Israel we can all accuse, maybe, and we can have that discussion. I'm not defending anybody there. I'm just saying the dehumanization of the Gazans is also happening on the Hamas, on the Iranian side, who pushed for that war just to scuttle the peace diplomacy that was happening.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue to my last point before I leave. Operation, a horrific, evil, barbaric operation like October 7, it doesn't happen overnight, and Hamas didn't happen overnight. It must have taken months-long preparation and with help with Iran, etc. I mean, there are some difficult questions that we need to answer here. Instead of very simplistically say there is hate and dehumanization. How did this went on? I mean, partially, how did this went on? Because of the Prime Minister Netanyahu allowed Hamas to just receive millions of Qatari dollars money and just keep doing business with them instead of, I mean, you're absolutely right, Alex, there's no partner for peace, but is this the way to build partners? In the past, undermining potential partners like Salam al-Fayyad and others, and literally chasing them out of the country, and partnering with Hamas in a covert operation, sustaining them as a way to divide the Palestinian political leadership for many, many years, decades, facilitating all this money flow from Ben Gurion all the way to Gaza. There are some difficult questions internally. Why did this went on, where this money was used for tunnels and dehumanization for year after year that we couldn't stop. So you're absolutely right. There is no partner on the other side. Then we have to build that capacity. Is this the way to build capacity? Is this the killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians? And
could I think we're getting far away from
is the way to build partners on the other side.
Yeah.
I don't.
So if I can I think the ambassador's right to bring it back. I didn't mean to suggest that history didn't exist or didn't happen before October 7th, or that there is not suffering amongst other people, including Palestinians that are there. So if that's the way that came across in my interaction with you, let me be the first to apologize, because that's not what I meant or intended to communicate. I was talking about a single event that I had witnessed as a representation of what I think has been indoctrination, and it's not unique to one particular area or society, as you said. Speaking to the broader point that you meant of, we need regional integration between cultures and countries and people across the board, right? So that we don't see a fomentation of hate, and we don't see the propaganda sort of taking hold across the board. And it's not unique to a single set of people that are there. So I apologize if that's the way that came across. I didn't mean to make you feel that way or communicate that.
I wanted to just mention, by the way, and I was going to try to get to Ahmed Khuzaie, who was going to be leaving soon, but he just popped off. I hope he's coming right back. Dan Wiener, who introduced me very kindly to Abdullah as a colleague, he actually wanted to know a very, very, very related thing to what we're talking about now. He was curious for somebody to answer, how can the Abraham Accords be leveraged to help resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? As opposed to just saying, well, we have to wait and we're going to forget about that because we got to deal with this now. Can the Abraham Accords be leveraged to help actually resolve the horrors that have been going for a long time? Chama, you clearly wanted to answer, please.
I can take that, yeah, because I think it feeds into some of the questions that are coming up in the room. And I understand your skepticism, Abdullah. I was there too, in terms of skepticism. You know, I come from the liberal progressive school of thought. So I happened to be in the UAE when things were moving in the direction of the Abraham Accords. And I knew that it took people like us to actually translate the policy level transformation and to translate those doors opening into real people-to-people conflict transformation. And that's kind of across the board, the understanding, even within the leadership, even as they try to, you know, minimize and kind of damage control in terms of what kind of initiatives can take place on the people-to-people basis, again, because things backfire and get completely misinterpreted and blown out of proportion. But it really takes people like us. And the other thing is, we had, you know, barely a year of the Abraham Accords under the Trump administration. Then Biden came in. There was a golden opportunity to translate that vision into real grassroots mobilizing and conflict transformation that only Democrats could have done, but they completely dismissed that opportunity and really failed to help us translate it into Palestinian inclusion. Democrats were the only ones who could have done that at the time. And unfortunately, that was forgotten. And even despite that, Saudi was moving towards Palestinian inclusion. 3 weeks or 4 weeks before October 7th, Saudi sent the first Palestinian ambassador to Ramallah. And so we had the building blocks to address some of these lingering bigger issues. But in order to even get there, as you notice, even in our conversation, when you start with the conflict, we go nowhere. We freeze and we constantly go in this loop that is totally shaped by an environment of deep dehumanization and propaganda that actively seeks to fan the flames of extremism on all sides. And on that point, Abdullah, I really want to say something, because yes, there is horrific rhetoric that comes out of Israel and even actions, but to equate the extremism within Israel to extremism outside of Israel in the region is just simply wrong. But what we're competing with is a massive media organization called Al Jazeera and many others under which the Islamist and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic Republic operate and propagate their misinformation. They take whatever that is said or whatever small, you know, actions or instances or incidents of extremism or big, and they totally blow it out of proportion to make even the idea of peace seem impossible, to stifle any potential for regional integration. And so that's why in a lot of Gulf spaces, policy spaces in particular, their outlook was, let's not start with the Palestinians. And, you know, I've heard it myself in many spaces where even in very highly curated spaces of conflict transformation that I have designed and that I have tried to put together for the purpose of de-radicalization and regional integration, I would, you know, be taken to the side and be told, well, next time when we do this, let's not bring the Palestinians. Because again, once these issues surface, there's a lot of sentiment, there's a lot of emotions, and then that, what it does is that it really stops our ability to even imagine what is possible, because we're stuck in the old paradigms. And that's why I think—
Shama. As I said, I unfortunately have to leave. I can't be late. The president of Duke is waiting for me on the other Zoom call. But I was really hoping to hear Ambassador Mark remark, because in terms of how this could pivot, he's on the ground, holding the pulse of the region. I hope I will listen to the whole conversation once it's published. Thank you all, and let me put my email. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
And I will be in Israel last week of June for a similar conversation. If anybody's going to be there, I would love to meet you, inshallah.
Yeah, would love to meet you.
And all of you can be, I can connect all of you, and you're all also on the Google Calendar, so you have each other's emails if you want it. Thank you.
I wanted to add one thing.
Wait, before you do, Zach. Wait, before you do, Zach, because Alex is also,
yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. I have to run as well. Thank the colleagues and friends. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and looking forward to continue working and talking to you guys. Amazing. Well, you run an amazing program as always.
I appreciate N7 and the Atlantic Council for offering you up to me as a sacrifice, and it was really nice of them and really nice of you to be here.
My apologies to the rest of the panelists that it was me, but no, thank you again. You run an amazing program. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute
pleasure.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
Absolute pleasure. Okay, so go ahead, Zach.
Oh, I was just going to add, it wasn't, I think the answer, although I think a lot of the things that Abdullah brought up are valid. I think for my personal, it's kind of a weird experience that I had with this, but I would say yes. And I think the proof is the fear that came, again, not that this all started on October 7th, but the week before October 7th, I was writing episodes for like an Israeli nonprofit educational company. And the episode I was writing about was about two specific things. One was about normalization with Israel and Saudi Arabia was about to take place. And the second thing, which a lot of people didn't realize, that was pretty well known, was potentially Saudi Arabia and maybe even the UAE were working on a potential financial program to replace pay for slay at the same time they were normaling. So kind of going back to the point of like, well, can we do this while ignoring the Palestinians, was actually, there was a very legitimate attempt to not ignore the Palestinians at that exact moment and to sort of call out and say, look, if financial reasons is what's causing terrorism or hate or antipathy between cultures, let's find a financial solution, therefore, to then fix it. And interestingly enough, or terribly enough, a week later, October 7th happened, and we're still having to deal with this. So to me, that just suggests that there was a real fear from whoever doesn't want peace to have shaken it right then and there and put us into this situation. So anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Well, I want to first of all welcome back Ksenia, as we lost some people. It's wonderful to get Ksenia, whose kids are probably in bed now. Shama, I wanted to say to your point, I loved the point that you made, and I appreciate everybody being very respectful with disagreements, which they always are. Thank God, I've never even had an argument on an episode, and which is wonderful. Shama, what I loved that you said was, yes, there are extremists in Israel. I mean, what country doesn't have extremists? It's impossible. It's not Garden of Eden anywhere. But to say that an extremist there is, in general, is the same as the extremist here, and I love that, because let's call a spade a spade. We're basically referring to Ben Gvir, right? You know, and Smotrich, right? We're basically referring to Ben Gvir and Smotrich. So the idea is, now I'm no fan of theirs. I don't mind giving my own personal opinions. I'm very much a moderate. I don't like extremists on either end. And I'm very curious what Ben Gvir and Smotrich's ideology is about the Accords. They just want it to happen, but in a vacuum. I have no idea. But Ben Gvir and Smotrich and like the despotic rulers of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the IRGC, you know, Houthis, any of these types of places or places that don't have free press, to put them on the same level is just not fair. It's literally apples and oranges. Yes, both are extremists, but I appreciate your point that like there's different degrees of extremism, and one of them is executing people for speaking up, and you know, and the other one is basically just saying things that are very intolerant and assholery.
Sure.
So
Boaz, I want to add to your points that
go ahead, speak louder, please, Yaara. Go ahead.
So I'm saying I would just add, you're correct, and I would add to your points, but there's also a difference of extremism that is in a more let's call it kind of in a space that is more controlled, right, within government. When you speak, you say your mind, which is different and extreme than some moderate opinions, versus people who are actual terrorists on the ground trying to kill people and do very violent acts and educate towards it as well. So that is different, and there's a difference between freedom of speech, which you could and should very much disagree when and voice that opinion when needed, but there's a difference between speaking your mind about what should like how to behave or how to move forward versus actually ending lives and preaching towards it and doing everything you can to take down an entire region.
Yeah, and I would like to add also that this might be a time that we have to hold multiple truths. And I very strongly stand with what Hamas said, that it's like comparing apples to oranges. You can't compare the extremism that has happened and is continuing to happen in Palestine between Hamas and some of the Palestinians. Because today, I don't know whether this was spoken, I had to go, my daughter graduated, and of course I taught her more powerful lessons. I told her that, you know, don't ever dehumanize somebody you don't agree with, like what we are seeing today, and don't ever call for the destruction of this country. I'm an immigrant and my daughter just graduated out of NYU. We are blessed to live in this country, and I told her we have to give it all to serve. So my point was about this extremism didn't start October 7th, but it'll benefit Palestinians to say that it did, because they can then disassociate themselves from Hamas and what Hamas has done for the last 15 years. Because when I went to the mosque with a Jewish rabbi, hatred towards the Jews were preached in the mosque. So the mosque today is battling a new religion, what I say is called Palestinianism. And we Muslims, if we go into the realm of whataboutism, we might never address the things that we need to in our community. Because the mosque, what is preached is Jewish perpetrators and Palestinian victim. It's a dangerous distortion. So I just want to make that quick point in case I don't get to talk later, because I believe I want to talk about the Abrahamic cause and the benefit it will bring to the radicalized youth and the de-radicalization of particularly the Muslim youth, because no matter what we do, if we don't de-radicalize, these accords are not about skyscrapers and business deals. It has to be about transformation. And in that transformation, we have to focus on three things. And one is bringing in new stakeholders. I might say, how about not an Abraham Accord, but a Sarah Accord? You know, we need more women and Muslim women at the table. Because
absolutely, but Soraya, I just want to interrupt you, not because of any other reason, but because Zach apparently is in Tel Aviv and there are sirens going off now for rockets. Zach, do you need to run to shelter?
Well, it's a pre-warning. Last time they...
You have 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, basically.
In 5
Okay.
minutes, we'll have to start running.
If you need to run, just run, please. Safety is far more important than anything we could possibly.
You don't want me to bring the camera? Do I leave the camera horizontal? No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
You can certainly bring the camera with if it'll help your boredom there, and we would love to have you on. That's totally fine.
Here we go.
So I get
Here we
it.
go.
I got it.
All right, at least we made it an authentic Abrahamic experience with a siren and everything. Great to meet you all. I would love to connect with you guys over email and hopefully meet you wherever you live.
Stay safe, Zach.
Okay, so
I'd
Zach
like to take this back to Abraham Accords. I think we got off into the endless meanderings of Palestinian issue, which we're not going to solve, and it tends to make conversations difficult, at least in my experience. Look, I think in contrast to what Abdullah said about the leadership, of course, he has his opinion, that's fine, but I think the leaders involved in the Accords deserve a great deal of credit for it. And I think beyond that, the fact that the Accord survived, I'm sure there's an element of, a popular understanding that this is a beneficial thing. But really, in these societies, it's the leadership that sets the direction. And I think we need to give great credit to Mohammed bin Zayed, to King Hamad in Bahrain, to King Mohammed in Morocco, and frankly to Bibi Netanyahu and President Trump. And if we want to lump them all in as sort of, having short-sighted or personalized motives for this, I think we miss the significance of what was done here and the fact that it's held up. And I thought yesterday, watching the president address the Saudi-U.S. business conference and telling the Crown Prince directly, I want to see normalization of Saudi Arabia's relations with Israel, and I understand that you will do this when the time is right for you, and I get that, but you need to do this. And I thought that was a tremendously important statement, and I'm very, very happy to hear it. So I wanted to make those.
I think that's wonderful, and I would like to actually, to the point, because it's nice to have these conversations go where they go, but of course we need to make sure that we also do talk about the stuff on hand. So I want to basically use our last half hour to ask some pointed questions people had that anybody can chime in and ask. And I know that some of you are still going to have to go soon.
Boaz, can I just interrupt you? And I just want to add just a very quick thing to what Ambassador Sievers just mentioned. Ambassador Sievers, you did mention, I think earlier, you said the UAE seems like it sometimes seems like it's an island. And it does, definitely, because, in the midst of all the hate and social media and the protests and everything. But, there's a bit of a good news, and I should share that because it gets lost in this whole discussion. And I don't want to exaggerate it, but, I also speak Arabic, and in the Arabic media, which is at the heart of the whole debate in the Islamic world, in the Arabic media, which is and this is completely not reported in the Western media. I always ask my friends in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Washington Post, why you're not attuned to this. There's a tremendous debate in the electronic, social, TV, print Arab media about this transformation. It's an amazing discussion. I'm from Pakistan, so I also speak Urdu. So when I go back to the people who matter in Pakistan, I tell them, you guys don't know. I'm so sad that the world is unable to translate what's happening at the heart of Islam, which is basically Arabic language. And the debate in the Egyptian and the Jordanian and mainly, and the credit goes definitely to the Gulf Arab media for driving this change. There's this change that is taking place. I mean, I don't want to prolong this, but I want to end this at this point. If I were to just mention the things that are being discussed, for people like us who went through and grew up in the 80s and we were indoctrinated into, and I was born and raised in Kuwait, which was at that time was the second largest Palestinian diaspora in the world. My teachers are Palestinian. I had a lost personality, split personality. I was a Pakistani who grew up reading about Abdul Qadir Husseini and a number of other leaders of the Palestinian movement, and you know, the change right now, including Palestinians, like somebody, I think I'm forgetting who mentioned, I think it was you, Boaz, you mentioned the Palestinians actually who are speaking up. So the debate that's happening thanks to Abraham Accords, not to exaggerate, is amazing. The intellectual transformation. It's yet to be reported probably. I know a few are attuned to this like Nir and Dan in Israel, but much of the larger world probably Alex, but much of the rest of the world doesn't know about the intellectual battle on the sidelines of Abraham Accords, and it's all thanks to Abraham Accords. I thought this is important to know and know.
I want to add to that quickly before we move on, just a couple of points, and then I will have to go soon. But Ahmed, I love that you brought up that point. That's what I'm always trying to say to people in the West. Obviously, it's not reported because even legacy media organizations have been totally infiltrated by the extreme progressives, and that convergence, that Red-Green Alliance convergence of progressives and Islamists. So it's very unfortunate. But if you tune into Al Arabiya and Sky News Arabia, the incredible discussions, whether it's on, you know, spiritual religious reform or the vision for the future or the Islamic Republic or geopolitics and sort of shifting realignment, it's just incredible, really, really like rich.
And Shama, it's not just the Gulf Arabs. There are Lebanese and Syrians and Iraqis and Jordanians and Egyptians who are doing this.
That's
totally. And even like since October 7th, if you tune into even like MTV Lebanon, the quality of the discussion was so different from what was being reported here. And then the other thing I want to point out, and also Ahmed, I actually translated a lot of those things to an English-speaking audience on social media, so we'll be in touch. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is something that Soraya mentioned, which is this tendency to deflect these problems and obviously use Jews as the scapegoat to all of the lingering issues in the region. And it really points to something central in the Middle East and North Africa, is a problem of agency. There is no agency or accountability. And so if we continue to kind of uphold the racism of low expectations, and we continue to deflect and to blame Israel and the Jews, we are not pushing through that kind of transformation within society that can lead to future thinking and innovation. But the good news is that it's actually happening. And the Abraham Accords were such a powerful symbol in really enforcing that idea of Arab agency. But unfortunately, the way it is spoken about and met with deep skepticism in the West frames it as something that was forced upon the Arab leaders as a Trump scheme, as a PR stint, when actually, and you saw Trump correcting course on this in Saudi 2 days ago when he said, you know, this is an incredibly like evolving, developing area you have done. It's crucial for the wider world to know this great transformation in the Middle East, you know, quote for quote what he said. And that sends a really powerful message. My concern now, after this really incredible Gulf trip, I have some questions about the Qatar as part of it, but my concern is how it is going to be reported in the West and whether the polarization in the media is going to continue to frame the Abraham Accords and Trump's wins in the Middle East as something that should not be touched and engaged with.
I agree. And just to continue on your point, Chama, actually, which I agree with so many things of what you just said. And I think, you know, so the Abraham Accords, let's just say before, because we've said so many things about this, in my opinion, it is probably the most remarkable and successful diplomatic achievement that we have in our like entire modern times, basically. And in my view, whether it's before October 7 or just with the first Trump administration where it came about, and now with a second administration where he's pushing the accords to keep expanding, whether the story is so underrated, and so forget about the fact that, of course, the Nobel Peace Prize is definitely should have happened, but putting that aside right now, the story is told not at all in the kind of spectrum that it should be told, because the types of dramatic changes that have happened in the region are just completely 180. And basically, you know, having seen everything, just to your point about how it's been covered after his speech, Trump's speech 2 days ago in Saudi, you know, what I've seen that the media, at least the Western media, has been focusing on has been much more like the whole Qatari plane aspect, which is, of course, should be addressed and talked about. But he made such amazing remarks in the way that he was received and welcomed, and the entire growing and coming together of a relationship that is again being so much closer. The importance of that and how this will contribute to the entire region and everything we've just talked about in terms of extremism versus moderation and all of that, that is not being addressed. And that is a terrible thing. That is something that the Western world and the Western media has not learned its lessons yet. And that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges that we all have to address and see how we can help overcome this.
Well, are the actual, you know, this is a question somebody asked me, Alexander Min, was on a past episode. He just asked a very simple, obvious one. Are the Abraham Accords a partisan issue or a bipartisan issue? Because if you look at it from the outside, it started with the Republicans with Trump. We had 4 years of Biden, where I suppose hopefully maybe we would have, without October 7th happening, had them continue with Saudi Arabia. I don't know. And then they're continuing, though, with a hard push now, again, with the Republicans. It makes it look from the outside like it's a Republican push and the Democrats don't prioritize it. So is this a partisan issue?
I would say that the Biden administration at the beginning downplayed it. I know they did. But I think after the first 6 months or so in office, they began to understand the opportunities. Who knows? We can't say for sure, but there were clear indications that there was a lot of progress made toward normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia in the period just before October 7th. And frankly, you know, the Biden team stuck with it throughout the Gaza war, and recognizing that it probably couldn't be done until the war was over, but they didn't walk away from it. So it wasn't entirely a partisan issue, but I think they, unfortunately, at the beginning, wanted to call it, you know, a Trump project rather than appreciating the significance.
Okay, and Chama, I know you are leaving, so I will say goodbye and thank you so much for your wonderful presence and words throughout.
Thank you so much for hosting us and bringing us together. We really need to be in the same spaces together. It's been too long. Love you all. Take care. We've survived the past year and a half, and I'm really proud of all of us.
Yeah, amen. We'll be in touch. I'll have all of you on in the future. Thank you.
I just wanted to add on the partisan issue that I can testify that for the American embassy in Jerusalem, from the very first day of Biden administration, they were completely on board. They supported very much every initiative that had to do with regional cooperation. We in Ropes were the recipients of a very generous grant of the US government that supported our program, the media program for regional journalists, to fight with fake news and disinformation. This program was scheduled for before 10/7. It was postponed, but not by law. And eventually took place twice during the 1.5 years of the war, basically putting together journalists from Israel, Palestinians, as well as Moroccans, Egyptians, Emiratis, Syrians. There were also many others. Again, there are stuff that politicians say, but there are also things that politicians do. by authorizing grants, by authorizing support and so on, and in this regard, it's very important for me to stress, because we have to be grateful also for things that happened. And I did feel that the administration, perhaps, at the beginning, just Mark mentioned, not exactly perhaps appreciating what is going on, but they very quickly got on board with all of that, and they were very eager to promote the normalization with the Saudi. What I can say also from my informal conversations with quite senior Saudis before 10/7, I heard from them that there was absolutely no probability for such a normalization without some kind of political horizon for the Palestinians, which is basically the same that they're saying now. And I heard it as late as August 2023. So then again, it's fine to make some kind of fantasy castles like in the Fuad Najmi book, but we want to engage in reality. So I think, it's I missed quite a significant chunk of the conversation, unfortunately, due to family engagements, but it's just important for me to say that I think that the fabulous Abraham Accords cannot be disconnected from their reality, here in the region, which is the reality of conflict. But they can serve as a positive example and environment to solve these conflicts and to bring more, back the moderation in Palestinian society and also in Israeli society, because you discussed, guys, earlier the radicalization. Well, I can tell you that it is being expressed not only in the end tool, which is the terrorism, the taking of life of somebody, but the ideology. The whole land belongs to us. The whole land of Israel, the whole land of Palestine, it's the same map. This is the extreme thought. This is the extreme idea that the other one does not exist or has to be wiped out. So this is something that, again, we have to, and I recently authored an article about de-radicalization programs that exist in Saudi Arabia, exist in the United Arab Emirates, in Jordan, and in Morocco. So when we are talking about what should be happening in Gaza.
And in Bahrain as well.
And in Bahrain, definitely, absolutely, yes. So there are also many examples in Tunisia, and there are varieties.
Azerbaijan just started. They just began.
Yes. But in Saudi Arabia, it's the longest program, along with Morocco, over 20 years of experience. There are a lot of lessons learned. It will be smart for everybody who is dealing with this question of what should be happening in Gaza next, to first learn what happened with these programs, because they are not programs that were done by Westerners to non-Westerners, but these are programs that are authentic, with a very clear understanding of the root problem. Okay, so that would be, I think, the ABC of what everybody who is dealing with these grand plans of reconstruction, rebuilding, radicalization of Gaza. So that's kind of important.
Cassini, I have a question. If anybody's doesn't want to chime in immediately, can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So it's about Abraham Accords, and this is also for Ambassador Sievers and also for you, Yaara, because the three of you have been involved in Abraham Accords one way or the other. And the question is very simple. With regards to the political horizon for Palestinians, can you just help us understand, and whoever listens to this, what is the problem, the political obstacle really, in Israel for an Israeli government, maybe the current government, maybe the next one, but for any government to commit to a political horizon on the long term? And that's what the Saudis really wanted up until October 7. I'm not aware exactly of the current position and negotiations, but up until October, it was just about, a commitment to a horizon or something in the future. And the reason I say the future and why there's so much reservations about that is because, let's be very honest, and I have, I've been raised and brought up by Palestinians. My teachers, I love Palestine. I have great Palestinian friends. But let's be very honest, Palestinians cannot have a state because they have intrinsic internal problems that prevent them from creating the institutions for a state. And the moment they got a chance to create a state, they went not for a state, they went for a civil war. That Israel and Jordan and Egypt had to intervene to stop the Palestinian bloodshed, back in 15 years ago. So the point is, we know that there are challenges for the Palestinians to really move fast on a state. So what's the problem with committing to, on the Israeli side, on a political horizon, and let the normalization with Saudi Arabia, and the doors that opens move forward.
Ahmed, first of all, I have to say how great is it to see you, and you look wonderful.
Yeah,
it's
it
been
is
a while that we did this podcast with you, and
thank you.
Yeah, and I would love to do it again because it's been a while and everything happened since then. To your question, so well, the situation is being like this. Until very recently, every Netanyahu's government, and in the last 15 years, I mean, 90% of the governments we've had, they were headbutted by Netanyahu. They were obliged to the two-state solution in their principle, in the principal vision of the government. So by saying that, well, it will not happen tomorrow, but it will happen at some point, i.e. the horizon, okay? So since 2009, this was basically the guiding line. Until the 2002, the last government that was created with Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and this government explicitly said, that there could be no territorial compromises, and there should be no discussion even about it. This was the demand of these two parties. So if you ask me, these two parties are just as huge of an obstacle as the Palestinian extremists are, because they want the whole deal. They want every inch of this land. And they are going also with this pendants that look exactly like the Free Palestine thing, okay? So just, with the whole land of Israel and so on. So then for this current government, this is, if they will adopt right now, this kind of political horizon, even, for the next 50 years, let's say, it will bring down the government. So the government will fall. Right now, there is more desire to stay in the government and even suffer from perhaps Trump's ire or risk the normalization than to do otherwise. Okay, so this is the calculation. This is the calculus right now. I mean, if it would be possible for them to promote peace with Saudi Arabia, with Pakistan, with Indonesia, without having this, discussion of future compromise about the territorial issue, they would certainly do it. But it's, as we know, impossible. So that, the statements that we hear from the Saudis, they aggravated during the last year. The tone became very harsh. It resembles me now what we've heard from them during the second Intifada, not less than that. And the demand became much more explicit. It's not only now the horizon. They're specifically talking, at least, in the open, about, well, so we will demand the creation of the Palestinian state. Well, we know that it's a non-starter because, I do not necessarily, share the point of view that Palestinian can never get a state because they had, bloodshed and civil wars. If that would be the case, I think no state in the world besides, I don't know, Finland or something like this, San Marino, would get their own state, because who didn't have bloody civil wars, unfortunately, so this is something that many countries, and Spain just, in this 20th century, and, countries in the Balkans, of course, and, and so on. So there are numerous examples. All of them are independent states and viable states, so Palestinians can get there as well. They are not as different as anybody else. It's a question of leadership. During Salam Fayyad's when he was a prime minister, and I witnessed it as a correspondent for Arab Affairs. I covered West Bank and Gaza as well. I remember that the state's institutions were thriving, and there was much hope that eventually they will, develop into functioning institutions. But that's exactly why Fayyad was sacked by, corrupt leadership of the PA that couldn't allow for something like this to happen. So this is a different story. They can have the institutions, but they have to battle corruption, the divisions, and all of that. Sometime they will get there. But, unfortunately, now we are in a situation in which the current leadership just unable, without losing its, ground, they're unable to give that to Saudis, to Trump, or to anybody else. I mean, I would be very surprised if they will have some kind of formula that will allow them to eat the cake and leave it whole as well. Okay, so yeah.
Here's what we're gonna do. We have 15 minutes left, and what I want to do right now is I want to go through a bunch of quick hit questions and get to each of you, including you, Ethan. I want to get to each and every one of you, and I want to have somebody answer each of these questions as we go and try to be brief, so we can try to address what people are asking. Now, an interesting thing, right? The biggest flaw of this conversation is that there's the running theme of, but we're getting away from the Abraham Accords, but we're getting away from the topic at hand of the Abraham Accords. It's kind of hard because the issue is that when we keep coming back to Israel and Palestinians, is like it's so connected in people's minds that it's almost impossible to entirely leave it out of the conversation, right? I had people sending me questions, bright journalists, politicians, some influencers, and I asked them very specifically, what questions do you have for these panelists? You, right? And they saw the poster. And they sent me questions. About half of them, though, were about Israel and the Palestinians and Gaza and this and that and this and this and this. And I'm like, you realize this is about this? And they say, yes, but how do you do that without this? So I saw this coming a mile away, that we would end up being drawn back like a magnet to it, right? Or like moths to a flame. So it might be a flaw, but it also, you know what? The finger is on the pulse. This is what people want to know because they see them linked. So let's get to a bunch of questions for each of you, and please jump in. Now, here is a very Abraham Accords direct question. There is a lovely and very talented individual, Owen Zaret. He asked, how active are Abraham Accords countries, which I will remind for viewers, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan with a little bit of an asterisk, how active are they in advocating normalization to other countries? Anybody want to take that? The countries that have succeeded, are any of them going out there as ambassadors to try to get other countries to join the club?
Okay, all right, then I'll jump in. I'll say that I think in this case, and I'm very curious to hear Mark's comment. I think in this case, I think actions speak louder than words, to be honest. And I don't even think that there's a lot of conversation that needs to be taking place, although that is also important. Like Amjad said in the very beginning of this conversation, they walk the talk. So actions are much more are stronger in this case, and I think we've seen it, especially the first 3 years of the Abraham Accords before October 7, how strong the relationship and genuine the relationship is between Israel and the Abraham Accords countries, UAE very much so as well, and I think that does a lot of the work, basically, because leading by example, setting some new standards by example, all the initiative and the trade and the tourism and all of bringing people together, that it's really a people-to-people peace, that all peoples were curious about each other. So that's my view on it, and I think when other Arab countries are seeing all of this happening, this brings a lot of curiosity and some really good jealousy sometimes as well.
Let me,
Mark, did you want to?
On this point too, I think it's by the example, by the success that you create a model that others may want to follow. And of course, everything got sidetracked on October 7th. I don't think they have seen any of these countries. And let's leave Sudan aside, because Sudan went down pretty much a collapse of their political system and a civil war, not because of the Abraham Accords, but they never really, fully became a party to it. But I think it was meant to be by example. I don't think they saw it as their place, any of them, to actively recruit others. But I'll leave it at that.
I want to add also, we see that there's political supportability, but we don't see organizational implementability, because nobody on the ground is doing enough. And if we want this issue, the Abraham Accords, to thrive and flourish, we need more people, more boots on the ground, because we have to cross-connect and organize very efficiently and effectively in order to do that.
Okay, so
I
that
want
comes
to
to
add
a
something.
question.
I want to add something very, very quickly,
Go ahead,
because
Ksenia,
there
go
is a
ahead.
specific example of very positive activity There was a report just recently that there are some indirect negotiations between Israel and Syria about the Abraham Accord track, and guess who sponsored it and guess who was the mediator? It was the UAE. So it means that not officially, but in a very, clandestine talks, quietly, the Abraham Accords are being promoted because this is the benefit and this is the goal of the whole region to get there.
Okay, fantastic. I love that you made sure to say that, because that's on point. Let's try to keep these answers fastest so we can get to a bunch of things on people's minds in these last 10 minutes or so. David Swindle from Alger Minor and Real Clear Politics, he asked, what are the next likely candidates to join the Accords other than Saudi Arabia? So I don't know whether or not Syria, you were sort of hinting towards that. Anybody want to take this one, the next likely candidates in our horizon?
People have in the past have talked about large Muslim countries that aren't Arab. Indonesia has been floated as a possibility. In the Biden administration, there was a lot of discussion about that. It didn't really develop, but I don't know the status of it right now. And then I think, I don't think we should ignore the possibility of Lebanon, depending on what the internal dynamics are over the next year or so.
I just want to quickly add to that what Mark Stevens said. 680 million people are from South Asia. We have always in the United States bent our heads and listened to the Arab narrative of the Middle East. And we just had a program, my friend Anila Ali, who heads the American Muslim Multi-Faith Women's Empowerment Council. We did a program just last week. Ahmed was on that as well. Dan was there. We talked about expanding it to South Asia, because we don't have to look at linear solutions. They never work. We have to do a systems analysis and see where the entry points are, where the leveraging can take place. So have we really done a system mapping of the system is a critical question. We have to continue to ask and promote the narrative in South Asia, because where I come from in Sri Lanka, the hatred for Jews is very high, at a very high level, which was never so. So we have to watch Asia too, South Asia particularly.
Absolutely.
Boaz, just to add very quickly to what Soraya said, this is 2025, and in September of this year, we'll be marking the 20th anniversary of it was truly a landmark event way before Abraham Accords, when the first leader of a major Muslim nation, it was President Musharraf of Pakistan at that time, came out publicly and addressed a gathering of Jewish leaders and did it openly. It had a couple of others have done it privately, but this was the first time that a leader from a major Muslim nation came out. And then he went, and I think he met also Ariel Sharon. They met somewhere in New York on the sidelines of UNGA. And then there was Prime Minister Erdogan at that time arranged for a first ever meeting between the foreign ministers of Israel and Pakistan at that time. And at that time, the Israeli cabinet actually issued an executive order removing all tariffs for Israeli businessmen for imports from Pakistan. Luckily, that executive order remains intact on the website of the Israeli cabinet. Not only intact, but has been actually probably renewed or something to that effect 3 or 4 years ago. So the point is that there is a possibility, and I like the idea that Soraya says it's not linear. It's good that Lebanon and Syria and Saudi Arabia and probably Azerbaijan, I don't know, Yaara and Ambassador Sievers, Azerbaijan is also a candidate, for the next round.
We have full relations with Azerbaijan, Ahmed.
Yeah.
Oh, you have diplomatic
relations with Azerbaijan. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And there's an embassy.
Yes, there is.
For decades.
So what about the reports about Azerbaijan joining Abraham Accords? Does it make sense?
misinformed, I
Right?
think.
Yeah, okay.
The relations are flourishing with alhamdulillah. It's
exactly. I like that. Yeah, of course. And by the way, the Azerbaijani-Israeli relationship is inspiring people in Pakistan, because we have a very, very strong military-to-military relationship with Azerbaijan. And during the war on Karabakh, there was a lot of talk. Obviously, there was a strong Israeli support to Azerbaijan as well. And there was a lot of talk about delegations from Israel and Pakistan being at the same time under the same rooftop in Baku. So that's inspirational for people in Pakistan as well, and maybe elsewhere as well, maybe Indonesia.
And there is another point about Azerbaijan, which has something to do with realigning all of the US allies together. There is the triangle of relations between Israel, Azerbaijan, and the UAE. And this is just an example of how countries, so there is an Abraham Accord with the UAE, and there is this normal full-fledged relationship with Azerbaijan, but the triangle, it's strengthening the American alliance in the region. And that could be serving as an example for other countries that are still maybe not involved in full diplomatic relations, but that could be a first step to adding them to this kind of alliances.
That's fantastic. All right, let's get through some more questions. You've got to be brief, but before I get to the quick hit answers, because I'm going to ask you after this to try to give me 30-second answers to a bunch of things. Ethan, I actually really, you've gotten to speak about your beautiful relationship with your Muslim friend, but what I want to know, I want to take advantage of your experience as a Geller Fellow with ICC. How did seeing the Abraham Accords in person, when you got to go with ICC, shift your perspective on the MENA region as a college student, because you are the next generation and you're going to help shape people at some point more than we are, so please.
So what I think is, which could be a pretty controversial take in general, I'd argue that places like the UAE are arguably more progressive than current Western societies. For example, there was a cohort of 40 Jewish, non-Jewish students, all Zionist students, who are coming into the UAE, going to the Grand Mosque, going to the presidential palace, going to public areas, and being not outwardly expressing, but just not hiding conversations. In contrast, at academic institutions, you've got people who are shutting you down, you've got people who are silencing, you've got administrations who are silencing you. And I think that dichotomy of seeing that so-called progressive society is not being progressive, in contrast to a non-progressive society actually opening, extending their hands and wanting that kind of conversation, it shows the success of the Abraham Accords and how maybe that kind of environment and that kind of thinking is how societies should be progressing. And another thing which I just experienced, this happened to me just yesterday, I have 2 flights to Israel planned for the summer, one this week and one in June. Lufthansa and Air Canada both canceled on me. And how I rebooked via Emirates and then fly Dubai to Israel. That is the only airline that was not an Israeli airline that I could guarantee would get me there. Which, again, it shows the mischaracterization, and it shows how even the private sector in Western society is politicizing issues and to make it something that they would like,
I think that's fantastic, and I love when you told me yesterday that happened. I'm like, you've got to mention that. That's so cool. You get more cooperation with the countries that we've made these deals with than Virgin Atlantic or something out of England. It's to quote Stranger Things, it's like being in the Upside Down. Okay, we have to talk about Qatar or Qatar, depending on where you're from and how you pronounce it. Noah Rubin, who was a student that testified with Elise Stefanik, he was one of the congressional ones, he asked me to ask you, what is Qatar's real influence versus their perceived influence? Let's get
where?
Yes, well, Western world. Let's say to the Western world, they're perceived with the way we perceive their influence over Trump and everywhere else, and their influence over Hamas and everywhere else. Give us what Qatar is versus what Qatar is perceived to be.
I would love to start with a small anecdote. There's something that I witnessed when I was working as a journalist in Gaza. It was in 2006 during the Palestinian elections. So at the time, nobody really thought that Hamas is going to win the elections, although there was this perception that they might get much more votes than, the first time they did not participate. So basically that they will take about 40% maybe of the vote. That also was something like a blow to Fatah and so on. So a day before the elections, it was January 25th. So January 24th, I went to Gaza to make a story about the preparations for the elections. And then I heard from a friend, a journalist, that the Qataris, the Al Jazeera, they brought about 250 people to cover these elections, 250 people, 250 journalists for Al Jazeera alone, okay? So Badah Khanfar, you, Ahmed, know very well, this figure, the mythological general director of Al Jazeera was there. All of the top reporters, all of the infamous, presenters, so everybody, there was everybody. And it was clear that while we were still in the dark, they knew what's going to happen. They were basically in every city in Gaza, they were in every camp. They were there to celebrate. They knew that this is something that's going to happen. So, I mean, how they orchestrated it, we still don't know. Because I know personally many Palestinians who voted for Hamas to punish Fatah, not because they supported Hamas so much. But then, in any case, the campaign that they waged was very successful. And it was a clean election. I mean, I was there. I mean, there was no forgeries. It was genuine, like voting for Hamas. And then, before even the elections were announced, the results, Al Jazeera was already, of course, like, full operational mode. Hamas won. Let's celebrate. We have this Islamic revolution. This is the word Thawra Islamiyya. This is what they used. And this is for you an example of, how influential is Qatar. Very influential. Hamas, Gaza, the elections that happened, the 18 years after that, it's their making.
Okay, so follow-up question about Qatar. This is from Gil Troy, who most of you should know if you don't, presidential historian. How did Qatar become so influential in the first place, and how to be able to fool people about their actual, support of Hamas that's happening under the covers? Mark or somebody want to take this?
Let me try it. There are lots of different things to be said about Qatar because it presents itself with different faces depending on who the audience is. I think at times it's been useful to the United States to use Qatari good offices with the Taliban, with Hamas. That's been considered useful by various American administrations. But at the same time, I think they are active supporters of Hamas and have been for years. There's nothing new about it. I think the Israeli decision to allow Qatari money into Gaza is something that everyone talks about. I think there's going to be more perhaps revealed about that after the war is over, but it was an intentional, well-considered policy, but the idea was to keep the economy afloat. But you can see, I was in Cairo during the year of Muslim Brotherhood rule, and they were elected. I noted Nir's point about how dangerous they were, but they were elected to the presidency. But the Jazeera reporting on anything that happened to Egypt always reflected the Muslim Brotherhood point of view. And when the army was responsible, they were always attacking the Egyptian army and presenting the Brotherhood as the heroes and the good guys. And it was very blatant to the point where the Egyptians finally cracked down and closed them down and put some of their journalists on trial.
So if I may add to that.
Yes, but you can add to that, Ksenia, but can you also, while you add to that, answer a very obvious question? When I asked early on, when I asked in the middle, which countries are on the horizon potentially, nobody mentioned Qatar. Is Qatar not one of the realistic possibilities to be joining, given their diplomacy and neutrality that they put a face on as? Ksenia, you were about to speak, so you can answer that with it.
Well, I think that they went too far for that already. We've been twice in a situation in which we had relations with Qatar. I mean, in '97, they opened their diplomatic office in Tel Aviv. I remember that my mother at the time, she was looking for a job and she was offered a position there, so she was never interested in that. And without knowing even what is Qatar, I mean, yeah, so. And later on, we had our guy there, Eli Avidar, for years until 2009. But things have very escalated since 2009 through the Arab Spring, through ISIS, through everything else that happened. And I think it's very clear that, the radicalization happened also on their side. And if we are starting about, to talk about, how they became so influential, listen, it's the media. It's the media, so the Arab Spring didn't happen through Facebook or Twitter. It happened through Al Jazeera. For, some of us who were there, I was in Tahrir. So everybody was showing this photo of writing Facebook on the wall, but it was actually Al Jazeera that people were tuning to. There was no internet in the country. Mubarak switched it off. But there was a satellite television, so since '96, they're extremely media savvy. And there was a joke at some point that there is a country that is called Al Jazeera, and Qatar is just a small island in it. Okay, so, and this is in a way true. There was, until now, unfortunately, ratings, you cannot even compare. And I'm saying it with pain. Al Arabiya, Sky News Arabia, all great stations, not even close to the ratings that Al Jazeera enjoys. They're rooted deep. And until we will unroot them, and I'm speaking about, the attempt of the Arab countries to do that, that was unfortunately, it was not supported by the US at the time, and so on, we will suffer from the consequences all across the Middle East.
There's no Al Jazeera in UAE. You can't get it.
Oh.
There is no Al Jazeera in Egypt as well, and still people watch it. I will have to tell you that they are watching it through Instagram, through YouTube, and through various other sources. Secondary
media sources. I will point out that Yifat Gat, who is wonderful and runs a whole wonderful coalition, it kills her that there's no PR team working on the Abraham Accords, and she was, and she basically wanted, like what Soraya was saying, she wanted to ask, like, how can the public really help promote it, because it's just not happening. Why isn't the peace in Israel with these countries more widely celebrated? And I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question, but it's depressing. It's crazy. You shouldn't have to be a fan of Trump. You should even be capable of saying, I hate that president, but be able to say this policy, this thing that came from it, is fantastic. It's amazing. I'm personally of the mindset that every single president I have, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I have no problem calling out on the bullshit that I think is just wrong and terrible. And I think right now that Trump accepting the plane from Qatar is a horrible decision, for example. And I also think that, but I also think that it's very important to say when things are fantastic. I think the true measure of somebody is that when they can compliment the side that they don't agree with, and when they can insult their own side. And that shows me somebody that actually is capable of being intellectually honest, and so on. But speaking of which, really briefly, does him accepting the plane from Qatar potentially in any way affect the Accords at all, or no? Is that just irrelevant?
I don't think so.
Okay. It doesn't directly affect the Accords. No.
Okay, good.
Many tests.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so then I'm going to ask one last very just intelligent question, and then we will finish. Ksenia, your video is off. Very dear friend David Kopp asked a very intelligent question. It brings us back a little bit to the stuff that we kept talking about before. But could a United States-backed coalition of Abraham Accords countries rebuild and govern Gaza, incentivized by trade, tourism, and economic development? It's a very bright, intelligent question. And we spoke earlier about Gaza. Is that something that's realistic at all? Anybody can take this.
Well, we heard Trump speak this morning, at least here in Los Angeles, about Gaza, when he mentioned that the U.S. should make it a free area or a free zone. So definitely Trump sees himself as part of that solution. And I mean, I'm very curious to hear what Mark has to say about this. But in my view, I do very much believe that a US-led coalition together with an alliance of moderate Arab countries is a very good start to look to how to look to the future of what Gaza is going to look like and how do we start repairing and working towards a much better a much better government there, a much better leadership there, how to start rebuilding a lot of the things that went wrong there, especially education. And I don't want to get too
Yaara, did Trump say this in Qatar, or was he in Qatar when he said this?
Yes, because it was not in the UAE. So yes.
Ahmed no, he didn't. He hasn't made it. He said it at the GCC gathering, I think, in Riyadh, and he made it what I think is a very fundamental point. Hamas must be either disarmed or be disarmed and removed from Gaza, because otherwise no Arab party is going to step in to rebuild it or to govern it. So that's kind of, that's been the thorny knot that isn't resolved, and it could be done perhaps through diplomatic pressure from the Qataris and others, but the Hamas leadership so far has rejected all such proposals, and we need the hostages returned in order for Israel to be able to bring this to an end. So I think those are the two fundamental conditions. If those happen, then yes, sure, a coalition could come in and remake it into a decent place with the support of the United States, but I think without American military.
Yeah, but of course, bring them home and getting rid of Hamas. Of course, the $1 million question is how, and that's where we are this whole time. But absolutely,
and disarming Hamas.
And
yes,
disarm. Yes, no, I was saying getting rid of Hamas.
Everybody agrees on that the Hamas needs to be disarmed. Yes, but since we know that the US is not about to put boots on the ground, and it wants to actually put boots off the ground in the Middle East and Syria, and additional places. So then it means that it will be eventually some coalition that will be primarily, comprised of neighbors of Israel and Gaza, which means basically that it will be Jordanians and Egyptians. Okay, so Jordanians and Egyptians with their own internal problems. I personally do not envisage a situation in which they would come into Gaza and physically start disarming Hamas. Okay, so I do not envisage in any point of view that the Jordanians will do it, neither the Egyptians. Okay, so it means that if it will not happen through diplomatic means, having united front that will include Turkey and Qatar and everybody else who wants good relations with Trump, then it means that there is only one party can do it, and this is Israel. And Israel is actually fighting for this for the last year and 7 months to disarm Hamas. So we are back to square one still. Okay, so I think these are all lovely ideas. And the Egyptians might safeguard the border better, or do other issues. The Jordanians can train the Palestinian new forces, but then there is question number one: who will, on the Palestinian side, govern Gaza? Because all of their plans to have some kind of government, transitional government, it might happen, like in Cambodia. Okay, so there are examples, but eventually they handed the authority to a Cambodian government, and this should be happening with the Palestinian. Some authority, this authority, some other authority, but eventually Palestinians have to rule Palestinians, so there is no other option in this regard.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to add one point to all of this. So just the point about disarming Hamas, which is probably the most important one, aside from, of course, bringing back the hostages, is that we started hearing a few months ago actors from the Arab world, including the Arab League, calling for Hamas to step down from Gaza. They didn't use the words disarm, but still, this was a major step. And we also heard officials from the UAE saying similar things. And I think that things like this are key, additionally to Israel's role in defeating Hamas, obviously. But they are key because they pressure from Arab countries is extremely important, as we've seen with Qatar's pressure over Hamas to release the hostage Idan Alexander. So these are also important.
Guys, unfortunately, I need to leave you because I'm in
That's okay. That's okay, Ksenia. We're actually going to finish now. So let me just say, by the way, I forgot to even show you, Yaara created this shirt that I'm wearing. So take a look. This is Yaara. She did this with information of like how to get more. So good for Yaara. She ran over last night and gave me this shirt. But yes, we're gonna let's all finish off together. Those of us who are here. Ahmed Khuzaie, if for anybody who was wondering, because he's the only one that didn't get to really speak at all. He apologized and said he had to leave. He's participating on live TV discussing the Trump visit suddenly and the signed agreements and behind the scenes discussions of the Abraham Accords in Iran. And so he's actually on live TV right now dealing with that. So listen, I wanna thank all of you for being here. This is an unbelievably complex discussion, to say the least. I love that this was a mixture of people from different faiths, and certainly including Jews and Muslims together. I actually really appreciate that not everybody felt the exact same way. Abdullah, saying some things that some people also would disagree with. But you know what? That's actually good, because these accords and these agreements don't happen simply between a bunch of countries that all have the exact same cloned mind and interests, right? This is the reality. The reality is that we have differences of opinion, and it's important for us to be able to work with those differences of opinion and move forward. So I really appreciate having each and every one of you on. And honestly, and I apologize for anybody who had to go early and didn't get to speak as much. I just wanted to sort of 20 seconds from each of you, who I am fortunate to still have left. Any final thoughts that you just want to say that you feel like you didn't get a chance to really say? Starting, let's say, with you, Yaara.
Wow, what can I say that has not been said? I think the only thing I keep going back to is that I'm very grateful to be surrounded with a lot of people that are like-minded, that don't give up, no matter how hard things are getting, and they're getting unbelievably hard. But I'm very grateful to be around so many inspirational people, and so many people that are doing incredible things, mind-blowing things, and we got to keep going and keep strengthening, encouraging each other to work towards better days.
Fantastic. Ethan?
Yeah, so the people on this call were the ones who were initiating the Abraham Accords, the ones who put it together. And without them, I could not do the work that I'm doing as a student leader on the campus. At the end of the day, the universities is what the next generation will be. And I would not have been equipped enough with the right information, with the right tactics on how to approach peace, how to approach conversations and find that common ground and that coalition building without the creation of the Abraham Accord. So to everyone who had a piece in that, it is so imperative, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for being here, honestly. Former Ambassador Sievers, any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's just, great conversation. Thank you for the opportunity. I think we had a good exchange of views, and it's good that not, I'm used to people not all agreeing. That's fine. But the point was, it was a civil and respectful discussion, and very, very productive, I thought. So thanks. And it's late here.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. It's a good thing that we're finishing off. We started 20 minutes late, so we went a little bit over. And last but not least, Ahmed, who anybody listening probably is like, why is he mispronouncing his name? But we discussed it beforehand with having Ahmed and Ahmed here. He said, call me Ahmed. Go ahead.
Exactly. Well, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just leave you with this thought that when we're discussing normalization and peace and the Gaza conflict and all very complex issues, we just need to remember there's another battle happening on the I would say sidelines of all of this effort, and that is an internal battle within Arab and Muslim states and Israel is at the heart of it, not because of anything Israel did, although Israel did a lot of things, but it's really an internal battle for many of our states and societies, where in order for us to surmount the challenge of making peace with Israel, we need to resolve many of the demons that we have in our societies. I'm sure there's an equally robust debate happening inside Israel with regards to this as well, and we saw a semblance of that, during our discussion. But it's much bigger at a scale when it comes to Arab and Muslim states. So that's why it's really very, very important that we remain engaged and make sure and ensure in whatever way we can that this succeeds.
Absolutely, and to your point, it's no coincidence that but prior to October 7th, we had a civil war, brewing in Israel, the society very divided over things, and Saudi Arabia was very close on being this huge next, step in the Abraham Accords, and no coincidence then. Hamas launched their attack and completely sabotaged everything and ended things with Saudi Arabia for at least the time being. And ironically, though, ended the threat of a civil war in Israel and united Israel during that. So it's crazy how life events happened. Just my own final thoughts and summing together. Look at our panel of people. We had Amjad on, who literally was going to see Trump right afterwards and be on CNN and one part of the world. We had, my old friend Zach Zorba Grashin in Tel Aviv, who in the middle of the chat suddenly had rocket alarms going off and had to leave. Obviously, we saw him again. He messaged me afterwards, should I come back on? I'm very tired. I said, come on, so at least people watching know that you're okay, right? And I think Senia also ran off during that and came back after the things, right? And and we have Abdullah, who's obviously much more critical of Israel, but extremely pro the accords and peace with Israel, which is really all that matters to me, is just have people coming together who at the end of the day have your critiques for this government, have your critiques for that government, have your critiques for these individuals and for those individuals. But at least can we agree with saying that the extremist groups that preach eradication, genocide, and hate are simply evil and terrible? And can we agree that our goals and shared goals should be a way to move forward in spite of any differences we have? And you would think that's something everybody could agree with in this world, but unfortunately, with today's social media algorithms and confirmation bias, we have a big boulder that we're constantly pushing uphill with even the most simplistic of arguments and points of view. But that's why we do things like this and hope that we can use those social media algorithms to our benefit to get people to watch people like us speaking. And hopefully there will be some people in Ethan's generation that will be watching this that had absolutely ignorant points of view about the region and Arabs and Muslims and Jews and Israel that will watch and say, wait a second, maybe there are gray areas when I saw the world in black and white. I thank all of you for being on immensely from the bottom of my heart. I am in Los Angeles, and I would not forgive you if you came to visit without seeing me the way Yaara does, and even staying in my guest house if you wished, and having a Shabbat meal with me. And I look forward to speaking to you all offline some more. So thank you very, very much. Salam alaikum. And I really just...
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I wish nothing but love and peace to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Great to be with all of you.
In touch.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Chosen Links. If you like what you heard, feel free to share this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our socials at Boaz Hepner on X and Facebook and at Hepner.Boaz on Instagram.